coming in. I mean, it's just one more meeting, but we'll try this and see how it works with a few hours rather than just like one. First of all, I want this to be an open work session. I want us to talk. I was kind of hoping we'd be in the community room, a round group where we could look at each other and just have a conversation. This is still a little disjointed, but I didn't think about the camera part of it. So, but I want good conversation, good questions, no arguments. If you're not getting the answer you want, let's try a different angle, or, send staff out for more information or something like that, where we don't take up a lot of time on a subject, but I don't want to rush and cut people off if they're in a mode, That's important. We want to have answers. Our budget is extremely tight, and we've got departments asking for more help. So that's going to be, I think, the focus, and when we get into the health insurance, we'll have more information on that later. I know that's going to be the sticky point. They're going to probably say, where's the money coming from? How do you justify it? Who's going to be doing what? That's real important. So let's make sure we get the answers we need so that we can make the right decisions going forward. So we're starting today with fire on the fire. The chief's given you lots of information. Let me see if I can find mine. Randy, do you want to give anything? Is there anything you want to say before Ron starts?
Well, I guess I could just set the stage for you.
Sure.
And I guess what I would suggest is that in your budget binders, if you want to turn to the general fund, first of all, because what I do in the budget is I do a narrative for the general fund, all of the items that are under my direct supervision, and then for some of the other funds, like the enterprise funds and the fire fund, I make comment. So I guess what I would do is, with regard to the fire department, the first 3 pages of my narrative basically give you the landscape of the finances and, and where we're at from the general fund standpoint. On page 4, I make some comments with regard to the fire rescue department in particular, and lay out some of my rationale for my recommendations in the fire rescue department. Primarily, just to set the stage, there are 2 significant departures from prior year budgets, and particularly from the 2015 budget. First is on staffing, and I do have a recommendation on the staffing situation. Last 2 years ago, we increased the number of part-time on-call firefighters up to 35. We increased the slots up to 35, and have had significant debate regarding the controversy between the fire department and the public works department regarding the public water supply issue. So this year, I am recommending, and the chief can address this, but I am recommending that that the board consider adding 1 additional full-time scheduled position to the day shift. And that is responsive to our documented history of difficulty in fielding a full crew on the day shift for emergency responses. Since January, I have been supplementing the fire department staff with one of my staff that is also a certified firefighter, and that has been a fairly high volume use. That cannot continue into 2017 for a couple of reasons that we'll get into in a different budget discussion. With regard to the public water supply, in discussions with the fire chief and with the public works superintendent, we have opted for this year, while there is a study being done, to split it 3 ways, the $80,000. So it's not all coming out of the fire department. Part of it is coming out of the general fund budget, which would be a contribution typically received from the public works department, about $23,000. Part of it is coming out of the fire budget, and part of it is being covered by public works for this year only, for 17 only. So those are the 2 primary departures from 2015's budget. Otherwise, it's pretty much a carbon copy budget. And I guess with that, I would defer to any questions that the board may have, or to let Chief DeMars jump right into it.
Go ahead, Ron. That would be good.
Well, you've all had the budget to review for a couple of weeks here. There's really, the bulk of the budget is really just any increases were adjustments based on history and the increased vehicle maintenance that we've been having in the last couple of years. There is no capital outlay requested from the department this year. And the only significant change is the request for one additional FTE for the day shift. And I think I've given you ISO rationale and justification behind it. I've given you our own policy, which has a minimum staffing built into it. And then just today, I put together the initial job responsibilities to give you a little clearer understanding of what his at least initial responsibilities, and as he gains time and experience, of course, we will broaden those. And then on the bottom, I just highlighted a couple of the policies that impact staffing on part-paid fire departments across the country and some of the rationale behind that. It's really pretty straightforward. I guess I'm ready to answer any questions that the board would have.
Ronna, how do you figure, what's your plan with this extra person? Time-wise, splitting shifts, how does that, or what would they do, how would they help?
Well, they would be the 8 to 4:30 shift. And I've got the breakdown. I mean, he's going to basically assist in a number of areas. One of the most extensive is we're required under a fire marshal's ruling to categorize hazardous materials in each one of the commercial occupancies we respond to. Janelle, that's part of the business license that goes out, and then every year we ask for an update. Time constraints, we've never gotten to 100% of those occupancies in any given year to be able to verify what they're giving us versus what is physically stored in the building. And that is one of the areas we would have that position focus on, as well as, I mean, the biggest thing is providing us the additional daytime coverage and the ability when Rob or I are either sick or have scheduled vacation, we at least manage to keep the 2 people at the station, which is critical for medical response. You know, and that is still 62% of our total run volume is medical. So that is that's the bulk of the rationale behind this person's appointment or recommendation for hire.
Okay, so they would help you with, like right now you're doing fire prevention stuff. Would that person stay in the building or help you, or?
No, we
y'all
would,
kinda
because many times we take, weather permitting, we didn't take the engine out today just because of the weather, and the hose bed gets wet and there's just additional problems with trying to dry the truck down after we bring it back. But if the weather permits, we bring an engine to all these public fire prevention activities, because it's a big hit with the kids and the staff at the schools or at the daycare centers. So
the three of you
he
would
certainly,
do that.
we would have all but one, individual. We have, and it's in my memo there. I mean, we have responded with 3 people in an engine. I mean, it's just daytime staffing, middle of the afternoon, whatever. When we had a structure fire in this current budget year that, we ended up sending out the second truck with 3 people on it. The initial pumper that was on the scene was out of water because it was in the hydrant district, but right at the very end of it, so it was exceptionally long hose lay into that structure. The first due engine went straight in to try to suppress the fire, and then the tanker had to come along and we, lay the line in after that. So that tanker responded with 3 people,
And
because that's who was there.
How many do you like? What I shouldn't say even what you like. What do you need when that first truck goes out for a fire? What do you need?
Well, by our own policy, 5 people. By NFPA, the standard 1720, which is the Organization Deployment Fire Suppression Operations for Volunteer Department, which is and in Michigan, ours is considered a part-paid department because we have 2 full staffing, but essentially we are a paid-on-call department. I mean, the bulk of our staff is not present at the fire station.
So do they recommend 5 also?
They recommend 4 people minimum on
4
scene
minimum,
for
okay.
operations. we have what's called 2 in and 2 out. And if you look at a fire apparatus, the driver, he's with the apparatus. He can't leave it. He's controlling hand lines and pumping operations. So then you have the incident commander who has to stay outside of the structure. So once you're inside and you're in an SCBA, you're sort of in an enclosed environment. And you're part of our fire gear really shelters us from a lot of the changing fire conditions until it becomes dramatic. So that outside person is critical for the inside. If the fire conditions change dramatically quickly, he can call them out, where they're not going to be aware of those changes inside. If we don't have the ability, if we roll with just 3 people, then it's a outside operation. I mean, we can't go
Nobody
into the
goes in
fire,
then.
and quite honestly, we're not going to effectively suppress the fire and save any of the belongings or the structure if we can't get into the seat of the fire and put it out.
So part of your issue right now is that you've got 30-some people who are your on-call people, and they can't respond during the day. Most of them have full-time jobs or some other commitment. So that's part of your problem, is nobody's coming, right, during the day?
Well, those that can, but,
Do,
you know,
right.
we've seen just internally, we've been trying to analyze this for the last year, and we have a lot less shift people, it seems now, than when the department first started. We had a lot of CCI employees that were rotated through 3 shifts, and probably 2/3 of our department now works a more conventional daytime shift, and that's had an impact on the department. Daytime, we struggled. Any part-paid fire department struggles with daytime staffing, because anywhere in the country, the bulk of the working people are a lot of them are in the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 traditional.
So you had a case this week where you had 2 calls back-to-back, too. How did that work out? I know they pulled Janelle. I don't know if they were both serious. I didn't hear what the result was.
One was medical and one was an alarm.
Oh,
It was
okay.
the
Yeah.
cardiac, the cardiac and North Star Academy.
Yeah, that's too. We just split resources to.
Okay.
I mean,
How many
It-
total
it-
people did you have then available?
when it was all over, or have you typed up the report? How many did we have total?
Too bad then. But Janelle had to be pulled to help, too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For the response, for the initial response, yes.
Yes, John?
In looking at the reports that we've been getting through the year, in addition to what you're indicating the need is, there's been an increase in the number of calls that I've witnessed, and it seems to me like the two kind of compound together and somewhat justify, at least, the safety standards you need to reach up to meet the standards of the state and standards that you try to achieve. So the additional calls that are being recorded and the need to respond to this community, it's a natural growth. It seems to me like the growth is not an unusual thing. It's a needed thing, and so I think that the request is justified. It's well documented, and I think that in the interest of our citizens, this is a good move.
Well, and I'll be frank with the board. If the money was in the budget for 2 positions, that's what I would have come to the board for. You know, I left a little cushion in there, because our vehicle repairs for nothing, we run them up every week. We maintain them the best we can. But we have had, in the last 2 years, we have had an inordinate amount of substantial vehicle repairs. Not due to accidents, not due to abuse of the equipment, just it's getting older, and we're running them a little harder, and we've had problems. So I kept a little bit of a cushion in the budget. Randy's budget, I believe, is a little more aggressive than my request was back, but we're really relatively pretty close on the total expenditures, so.
Well, I guess the only additional comments that I'd make as township manager is I'm looking at this more from the standpoint of the community response aspect of it. You know, we have 35 slots that are available to be filled right now. I think we have one
33.
or two. We have two that are not filled currently, and we're in the process of looking at that. But the issue that I see is when the siren goes off, I watch out the window to see how long it takes and how many people respond. And our demand is going up, not so much the number of call demand, but the types of calls. This year we had a very unusual fire season. You know, we're 2/3 of the way through the budget, and we've spent on firefighting, we've expended way more than 66% of the budget. We're at 78%, I think, in the firefighting. But the issue that I have is if we've got a PI accident, we need 3 people to respond to that accident, and that's going to happen right out here. It's going to be right outside our door almost. It's going to be either at the Lowe's intersection or at the Walmart intersection typically. So we need to be there fast, and we need to be there with full staff. Now, with Janelle being available, we had that coverage because she was right here. Come January of 17, she is now a fully certified assessor, and she is going to be going full-time to assessing because we have to get the tax roll up, meet the AMR requirements, and get our I don't want to say it this way, but get the properties where they're supposed to be on taxes because we are suffering losses in the commercial area. That's the primary thing is the response capability. You know, but we provide a service. Our mission statement in the fire department is to provide that level of service to the residents, and we need to have at least 3 people to do that. And we need to be guaranteeing that we have the availability of 3. And that's the primary reason that not only support, but I brought it up with the chief that we need to go for that 3rd position in this budget cycle. And the other thing is we are getting to the point as a community and as a demand center that we cannot continue to rely primarily on paid on-call staff. Ron's right. In the day shift, we are not getting the response for a number of reasons. You know, people have jobs, they have other lives, there are other issues that come about. We're just not getting the daytime response, so we need to be able to counter that and to offset it and guarantee that we can do that. And that's my rationale for the recommendation that I've made.
One of the conversations we had, Ron, too, was about hiring some type of office support. I didn't see that recommendation. I didn't tell you that we had to do that or anything, but I just want to have you address that a little bit. Somebody that can do some of the data entry or answer the phone or something so that you guys can go out and do what you need to do, and you don't have to pay or train someone as completely as you would an actual firefighter sitting there. Some of the tasks that you do, you've got a log back to the beginning of time of everything that you keep up and you go through. And at some point, we have to transfer that over to your replacement, whenever that is. So I thought in the interim, maybe if we had an office person, whatever you want to call them, if they'd have to be somehow fire certified or clerically certified, is that still an option, or is that a waste of money? Or
Strictly office, if they were not going out in suppression or medical or extrication, any of that type of operations, we could train in-house. But honestly, my wishes, if I was going to do that, is I would hire another fire position,
Right.
and I would, you know, he or she
valuable. Mhm.
would be doing that data entry, because it's imperative we all keep Firehouse is our main operational software program that we operate. Tracks fire calls back to the day back in the early 80s when we got a hold of Firehouse, and we're still operating that today. So we have a tremendous amount of history. And it's very helpful, some of those reports, you know, as we can compile those reports in any number of ways, and we pull that data to look at trends and to look at where we're going, where we need to focus our fire prevention, where we need to focus our staffing on. And if I was going to bring anybody in just because of that need, that, you know, medical calls, 2 people can go on. a fire call, we can go on 3, but we can't even do an extrication with 3 people. You know, you've got the truck operator who can't leave the truck. I mean, he's responsible for the truck, the hydraulic lines, whatever they're running off that truck. We have to set up safety cones. We have to make our work zone safe. 41, I've always said, if we are going to injure or, God forbid, kill a firefighter, we're more likely to do that on US 41 than we will at a structure fire. Because we can control the fire scene to a certain point with enough staff and command staff. On the highway, you have people that are busily watching the extrication process, not watching the road. There's factors there that we make it as safe as we can, but we can't control it completely, and never will be able to control it. So,
Yes, Pete?
After reading all the reports and then throughout the year just asking questions, it's almost when you read it and you start tracking it down with Marquette Township growing, it's almost like you're saying, he's not comfortable serving our residents under the circumstances they're dealing with. I've been over there when they had a call and, you know, they're waiting for the people to come to go, and there's so many inside. But we're gonna have a tragedy pretty soon if we don't start really taking care of it. And I think he's basically telling us in his budget and also all the reports of how many calls they have, how many people responded, the nature of the makeup of the department. You got younger people, full-time jobs, day jobs. They have kids and they're gone with their kids and that. How many people can apply? And you can hear the siren going off again and again, and that means that they're not there yet. So I think he's telling us he's not comfortable as a fire chief under the conditions, and that's why he's asking for one. And
another issue or point I'd like to make too, if I have the resources, if you look at our ISO report, we were less than 5 points away from, we were 4.9 points away from becoming a Class 3 fire department. Marquette City is a Class 3 fire department with 8 full-time staffing. We take NFPA 720, we massage it, and we focus on the areas that we need to focus on. Within 2 years, 2.5 years on the outside, we can invite ISO back, and I guarantee you we can be a Class 3 fire department.
And what difference does that make to the public then?
Insurance. It's a huge, whether you have a residential home or you have a commercial building, when you get down in these, when we hit the Class 4, this last one, where we went from a 6 to a 4, where now any impact we make is across the board, both residential and commercial. When you get into some of the higher classifications like 6, it had a bigger impact on residential than commercial because commercials are always bigger. They have, fortunately, a greater incidence of fire, but when they do occur, they're normally pretty catastrophic, simply because of the size of the structures and the potential for loss of revenue, potential tax revenue loss.
Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on the comment that you made. This third position would be station coverage as well. So it would be somebody that would be there while these two are out doing inspections or out doing the things that they typically do. It would be a third person in the station, ready to respond, ready to get the equipment ready to go if the siren goes off, but would also be able to cover the phone, cover the public contact type things that would occur, and do the data entry. So there would be a clerical aspect attached to it as well, which there is with both of the current full-time positions that we have, but it would basically provide that additional coverage.
I always try to ask what I think the public would ask. That's why I'm throwing some of this stuff out so you can give the answer that they need. The other question I think that should be answered, if you can, is what of the 35 people, why aren't all of them or close to all of them showing up? What's the percentage of those that have full-time jobs? If we have people on staff, basically, do we have an answer for that? Why they're not coming? Because if we're committing to a full-time person, and we know that there are people out there that should be showing up, why don't we have them?
Well, there are some of those issues, and we'll be dealing
Hey, the
with those.
question has to be asked.
Yeah, and we'll be dealing with those issues, but, the simple fact of the matter is, when you've got a paid on-call department, this is not their primary job. This is a fill-in job, and they might be at the grocery store with their kids. They might be at the show. They might be doing anything other than, they might be out on the lake fishing. when the siren goes off. So you cannot guarantee at any particular time that you're gonna have more than a couple of people show up, basically. You know, and I'm not saying it's because of lack of interest or lack of willingness, but they just may not be able to show. And that's what I'm saying. We're getting to the point. We're almost over 300 million value in this community, and it's a commercial community with a lot of traffic and a lot of aspect and a lot of visitors coming in here. We need to get to the point where we can ensure that we have response capability, whether it be a drowning out at Little Presque Isle, or, you know, anything, the inland waterways, north part of the township, whatever. We simply need to be able to meet that requirement of responding with appropriate staff.
The truck
And
accident.
we can't really do that relying on call only.
Well, the reality is, in true cash value, we are actually protecting, because I had Dulcie look it up, $549 million worth of.
Protected
That's
assets.
residential, that's true cash value across the township.
500 what?
549 million,
That's why she had her hand up.
with 2 people.
That's what I
Daytime
wanted
people.
I'm
everybody to
talking, I
hear.
was talking SEV.
Yep. John?
With all the discussion, this community is on the cusp of having an influx of other industry, perhaps, certainly residential and commercial. I think when people look at the community, they look at the ability to provide the safety needed and the fire department. I think that it's another feather on the scale of saying why we need to be prepared and be able to document that we can respond properly. And one other point I'd like to make, I think once and for all we ought to establish that every employee of the fire department should first be a fire department, a firefighter. It's just like the service. You may have cooks and you may have other people doing different things, but their first responsibility is to be able to defend the country as a soldier, or as a sailor, or as a Marine. And that's the way I look at the fire department. Every employee that's over there that's there and is going to be part of the team that's going to be working needs to be first a firefighter. And we shouldn't even ask that question anymore.
But the public does. So they needed to hear that answer.
Well, we give them an answer.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Should we had talked about expanding the department even farther. Is that, we want to go with that today? We just want to talk the budget?
I think when we fill to 35, and as we deal with some personnel issues, I really don't believe that we need to go. I mean, a downside of all the paid on-call people is on the medicals. You know, you look at our fire call budget has gone up substantially. I don't want to have so many people that 3 or 4 people are on the medical and we have 17 people sitting at the station. I mean, that's just not going to be, we're not going to be cost effective in the other direction.
Yeah,
So-
we've talked about this numerous times over the years. There will come a time where the department is going to need to be a staff department. I mean, we're moving in the direction of equaling, the value and the complexity of the city of Marquette. Whether that's in some kind of a combined type of an authority type fire operation or whether it's our own operation. At some point, we are going to be faced very seriously with that question of, do we make that transition to more of a staff department? I'm not saying get away from, on-call at all. I'm not saying that at all, but we may need to expand our scheduled firefighters based upon demand. We've got 2 projects in the hopper right now that just between the 2 of them is another $200 million of value, and could be as many as 70 to 80 additional residents in one of them. So, you know, those all, every time you have that kind of an influx, and Trustee Marks is correct, when the hospital opens up, we're gonna be having more residents in the township. That's gonna happen. There isn't anywhere else for them to go.
And just more people on the highways and,
You know, it is gonna be more active, and we are gonna have higher requirements. Now, that's not on the immediate future, but I'd say within that 5 to 7 year time frame, you're gonna be seriously looking at possibly converting part of the existing fire hall to residential.
Lynn, but on the other, so they have inspections and all these other things, so by doing that, that keeps the fire rating down too, by them getting in these buildings, get them inspected, stopping some of the bad habits. So I think that's gonna improve upon the fires that happen in businesses and that, so there are other things for them to do. It just bothers me that, you know, and we're dealing, how to say this is, we're dealing with a younger group of volunteers. I mean, if you belong to any club or organization, you know you have problems doing projects and stuff like that because the demands on them. A lot of times the father takes the kids to a soccer game and the mother's working or something, and you can't leave that kid at a soccer game, he can't respond to that fire, so that's what you look at, so I think that's good. And another quick question about equipment. That Seagrave truck sort of bothers me. You sort of watch that thing happening, and, you know, so down the road, he's gonna have to do some replacements because of that particular truck.
and we found out how that's gotta be funded, how differently than we
Right,
didn't
exactly.
expect too.
I don't want, you know, the general public to be concerned. I mean, Seagrave is it's a fine piece of equipment, but it has been a maintenance hog. I mean, it has cost a lot of money in maintenance. But it's fully serviceable. How long it'll be fully serviceable is up for debate, and whether or not we continue to pour money into it in repairs and corrections as opposed to replacing it with something else is an issue the board will have to address or deal with at some point.
But our fire department does a great job.
Yeah,
You know.
they do. They've been
And
having lots of
and I guess I
calls,
learned
too.
more and more about the fire department. Danny brings up different things about, you know, what happens, they have to be up, ready to go. Ron, his last meeting, told him that at the spur of a moment, they have to stop what they're doing and taking off. And every time I hear that siren, you know, I'd have a hard time getting out of my chair sometime. But, I mean, these guys are up,
Yeah.
no matter what they're doing. They could be having supper, whatever, they're up and gone. So the dedication of the young people and older people also, it's commendable, so. But we have to find the right balance. In our cases, with our growing community, with the youth that we have on the department, you think you'll be looking, like Randy said, more and more full-time in order to take care of it. Because our buildings are bigger, it takes more people to go to a fire. Heaven forbid we ever get a business that's catches on fire, because, you know, the size of the building is, you know, 3 guys not gonna cut it, so. So his budget is, to me, is done very well. I've been watching it, so.
In the fire budget, as well as all of the budgets, we have included the 30% increase in electricity and, you know, the increases in other areas that we're aware of, at least. The one thing that's not in here is health insurance. And as Supervisor Durant mentioned on the health insurance issue, we're in the renewal process right now for our health insurance. It is a much smaller dollar amount than it used to be, simply because we have more people opting out of health insurance because they have coverage in other areas. But it's still going to be a significant dollar amount that's probably going to be somewhere between the 5 and 10% range on the health insurance. So as you're looking at these, the figures for health insurance, be thinking in the back of your mind, possibly 5 to 10% higher on health insurance.
Go ahead, Ron.
Just a couple of things I'd like to bring up. Number one is Pete did expound on some of the maintenance issues we're having, and we certainly are. But, you know, kudos to Rob. We have taken on, and which is also cutting into staff time, but we have taken on a much greater role in maintenance of the vehicles. Some of the jobs that we would have automatically called Crossroads, whatever, to send out, we've been calling R&R, that the service that we are now using for our main maintenance provider for the heavy equipment, has been very cooperative. Call down, we give him the symptoms of the unit, he'll give us some ideas, and Rob has taken on a much greater role in the maintenance, and we have saved thousands of dollars over having to have R&R come up. Our prior provider before that, some of the heavy maintenance, it had to go all the way down toward south of Oshkosh to get serviced. Out of service, out of the area, road time, staff time to get it there and back. And we've eliminated a lot of that. You've still seen a pretty significant maintenance increase, and that's because we still are struggling with a lot of the day in and day out problems with that apparatus. And one of our, even 77, which is our primary rescue pumper, it gets the most hours on it. It gets used heavily because it goes to all the rescue extrications, the highway accidents, as well as structural fires. So it's getting older, and the wear and tear is showing up on that. So we have tried to significantly impact that maintenance side of it. Other thing that I wanted to mention is, as we evolve as a fire department, we have a lot of options. I would foresee the next step that I would explore a couple years down the road is if we have full-time day staffing, a minimum to get the engine out, 4 people daytime staffing. You can look at our part-paid people, and you actually have a duty crew come on at 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. You pay them a minimal standby, and then if they go on a call, they get their fire pay. And you have people, it's a grown-up sleepover. You have them stay at the station. They're immediately available for call late at night. And you can do that short of putting additional full-time staffing and the overhead that comes with that. So, I mean, there's a lot of creative ways to staff the fire department to give us the response we need, and without, having 15 or 10 or 15 full-time staffing there. So we just need to evolve as the township evolves and make sure we stay one step ahead so that we can provide the services we have to provide.
Ron, I mentioned before, but what's your feeling on public safety? Is it effective, not effective? What role do they play? Firemen or police department first or second? Or is that effective for something like this down the road?
There's public safety departments all over the country in operation. It's hard to bring a public safety department in. If you were to look at our department 10 years from now, it would be difficult to implement because of the traditions and some of the staff and how they feel about public safety versus fire service or whatever. But it's a viable. Escanaba is an excellent example of a department that manages that very well. Gladstone manages it very well. Manistee manages it very well. It's another way to have, staffing. Your police officers carry their bunker gear in the patrol cars. And, the only problem is, just like any occupation, they can be committed. So, yeah, they're on the road, they have their fire gear. That does not guarantee you're going to get them on every call or they're going to be available to break away from wherever
I talked to
they're
the
at.
guy in Escanaba. That day he was a police officer, and he just said, I said, what happened? You get a fire. He said, well, we go there, the trucks go, the car goes. He said, then you're sitting in the car directing traffic and you're just watching. You want to be in there and help them people. So it's a balance of the two. But
And
they work very hard at it, trying to control it that way.
The biggest issue that we have with public safety is we don't have our own police department.
Right.
That's the biggest issue. We would have to establish a law enforcement operation first. But jumping back to the budget, on the numbers, basically, if you look at the numbers on the budget, there's about $157,000 difference between the fire department, almost $158,000 between the fire department's request and my recommendation. There are really 3 areas where that difference is. And basically where it is in firefighting. I went back over the last 10 years and did averages and came up. I added $5,000 in the salary line item, and then the attendant bump ups in the FICA and the taxes and things such as that. And in the vehicle gas under vehicles, I increased that by $1,500 because I see prices going up over the next, over 17, the projection is, and we're starting to see that now. They've gone up about 20 cents in the last couple of weeks a gallon. But the biggest issue is, and Ron tried real hard with this, not to have to make the payment for the mortgage this year. But the general fund cannot absorb that. So that was an $84,000 difference just on itself, the payment for the mortgage payment for the fire hall. So, and that's where the difference is, and that basically brought us down to the zero balance, which we need to, we can't carry a balance going forward, a fund balance. So it has been absorbed into operations, and those are the changes where I differed from the fire chief.
Ernie, you had a question before?
In the past, I've addressed having additional staff over there all the time. It's been 2 or 3 years I've kept bringing it up, that we had to really look at it. But looking at that and trying to look at all your documentation and that, and looking at it from a business standpoint and that, it's difficult for me to put together for the public as to the increase of all your runs from that. I think graphically, if you could do something graphically, something like the sheriff department does, to show it, will be a lot easier for people to see the increases on different areas and that. For them to look at one of these printed output, they're just gonna put it aside.
They get lost, yeah, they get lost in the numbers.
They'll look the first page and they say, that's it. They're not gonna go any further. Graphically, if you can do it graphically, you will gain a lot of people because they can see what's happening in that. And if you can do it for a time frame, not only this year, but previous years and that, and it gives you some historical data to really hang your hat on as you go forward in that too, so.
We have the capability now. It's just the reports that Supervisor Durant wanted for this meeting, they were so statistical that they couldn't be represented in a single graph. That's why you have the expanded version of them. Half a tree went down for that.
But
that report.
I think that's an excellent comment, and that is something that we can do, is to basically demonstrate trends predicated by by graphing, bar graphs or pie charts or, whatever. We can do that, certainly.
Because when I get this from the sheriff's department, it's very easy to read as to what's happening in there and that. You can understand it real quickly in that. And that's what I'm used to, and that's what I used to do in that. Whenever I had to ask for more dollars, I seemed to get it more when I was able to do something like that for management and that. It was difficult for them to deny it then and that too, so.
Well, and I think something we need to look forward at as a township and as a department is the rapidly changing EMS that's going on out there right now.
We're gonna go there next. Why don't you talk about that?
We're experiencing, the county is experiencing times when we have no, and I worked for 25 years for EMS, and I've never seen the trends that we have now where we have no ambulances available and, one ambulance standing by at the post that's trying to cover Ishmael, Nagani, and Marquette Township. It's just, and I have many good friends in EMS, they can't put their finger on what has caused this sudden increase in volume, but I think that's another component of service to the residents that we need to keep our eye on. I have no idea what Duke Life Point's philosophy is on EMS. I knew what it was under Market General, but they hold it pretty close to the cloth. So I don't know. Right now they're surviving, and we have the ability. We've expanded our EMS capabilities to the point we have a lot of ability to stabilize at the scene. We can't start IVs. We can't, there's some things we can't, drugs we can administer. We can administer albuterol and some other drugs, but we are still limited. We're running as a basic EMT service. So
why don't you give us about 5 minutes on what we've kind of talked about and why you think.
Well, I can give you an example. Just last week, Ron and Rob were the only two that were here at the station, and Ron had to go man an ambulance because they didn't have enough crews to man the ambulance. So he was gone, with my permission, he was gone manning an ambulance, parked at the, where were you? You
they parked it. Well, we wanted to park at the station. Central wanted us further west than where we were. We were about to leave, and another unit came in service. So I never actually left
They were going to be covering
the station.
all the way. I mean, I mean, that's how
county is
difficult it's
struggling.
getting.
Yeah.
Well, you've got such a large county, you know, it's such a large county that if you've got, you know, an ambulance up in the west part of the west part of the county doing a response or a transport, and another one transporting somewhere else, you're down to two? Would that be-
Well, yeah, in defense
cover
of the
whole
system,
county?
LifePoint has put on more people. But the problem is, on top of the increase in emergency traffic, there's constant day transfer facility to facility, nursing home to the hospital, hospital to nursing home. So there's more units on the road than they've had in my recollection, but we're still, I mean, we still have days when it is very, very thin to find an ambulance in the county.
Well,
So-
that means you guys are on scene longer waiting for an ambulance to arrive.
So we're not actually recommending we buy an ambulance and go that whole route, but Ron's got another suggestion, right, of how to expand a little bit
Well, options, we've been
So-
talking about a variety of options to try and alleviate some of that issue.
and get another vehicle for different purposes with
Mhm.
different training and being able to be a little more helpful at the scene, not having to wait and having different capabilities.
Who's gonna pick me up in a pickup truck?
We're gonna buy a crane, and that's what we're gonna do for anybody that can't get out.
Well, and something the board needs to, you know, EMS service across the nation typically costs more money than it ever brings in. You know, a certain percentage of the people that you transport are homeless, indigent people. You get
You're not
little or no payment from. I mean, that's just a fact of life. So it's certainly not a money-making proposition. If it's a break-even proposition, you're doing well. But, I mean, it's something that's out there on the radar, and we need to, you know, I have no idea what they're gonna, I mean, they're pretty much tapped for crews. They've hired more people at EMS, and it's still, there's times when it's pretty darn thin in the county.
It would just allow our crew to be more effective at the scene, and can you transport? You could, right?
Basically.
Well, that, you'd have to buy an ambulance.
If
We
you
can't
had- right.
transport in the vehicles. We're what's called an E unit. We're a non-transporting emergency response unit.
But you
But-
can do different stuff. If we go to this next level, you could administer different drugs and handle the scene differently to help.
Well,
the people.
we wouldn't be allowed any more drugs than where we're at now unless we went to an advanced or a paramedic level. But we could ultimately, and I don't know what the percentage of advanced runs, meaning they're a paramedic required versus basic runs. Any basic runs, we would be able to transport, you know, go to the call, transport the patient to the hospital and recover.
But the board would have to go into this discussion recognizing that it was likely going to be a cost center, not a
Yeah,
revenue
it's
center, and
not
possibly not even a break-even center. And the other piece that you would need to consider, and probably need to get an opinion from your civil counsel, is I do not believe that would be able to be funded out of your 2.5 mils, because that's for fire prevention and protection. It's not for medical
Yeah,
services.
we talked about that.
So, you know, those are a couple of things that you would have to take into consideration looking at that if you choose to go forward with it.
So we just want you to know how the department's growing and what the needs are gonna be and how involved this can get. And it's up to us how we wanna continue that line too. It's not, you know, demand is there for a lot, and so, you know, we're not gonna buy an ambulance, like I said, but I wanted you to hear some of that discussion, because it may come up again. John?
Not only is, well, I think a simple answer to why there's an increased demand is that more and more people feel entitled to the service. And as that grows, the demand comes to our department as well as everybody else. But I think we have to accept that, because, well, people can ask questions about why we're trying to increase our responsibility. The bottom line is they feel entitled to having the service at their door when they need it. And I think we should be willing as a board to look at all the numbers, come to the conclusion, and then be able to defend it and give them those answers. I don't have any problem giving them an answer. they want somebody at their door when they need them. And that's what we're trying to do for them. And if somebody doesn't like that, then they need to take our place up here and do the best they can.
And realistically, I think the way that you would approach that kind of a question would be exactly the same way you approach the local roads issue, would be to create a package, basically. Here is where we were, here's where we are, here's how we might be able to get there, this is what it would cost. If you're interested in doing that, it might be a millage question, to put out for the residents for, whatever it is, half a mil, 3/4 of a mil, or whatever, to fund the ability within our community to provide that service. But the way things are going right now, if you're looking at funding that out of general fund activities, we're not going to be able to do that. Unless the Senate does something with the dark stores legislation, which I'm not expecting, but if they do in this lame duck session, then we're talking about a different situation, different scenario. We're then putting back a significant amount of money into our revenue stream.
Go ahead, Pete.
Ron, I thought about this because we talked about an ambulance before, and you explained to me the cost of an ambulance, and you probably wouldn't even break even on it because of the cost. How many ambulances are out there? Would it be possible to store an ambulance in our fire hall for our convenience of our people? Are there any extra out there? It's probably a crazy question, but I was thinking for the residents here, and if we had to use it, or they would use it, or man, to get to our residents faster or something like that?
Well, it's not as easy as just putting the ambulance in the hall.
Exactly.
It has to be licensed and inspected, has to carry a preset amount of supplies in various categories.
I mean, if that would belong to the hospital, at least at a substation up here.
No, I don't know that they'd be in favor of that
Okay,
because of the revenue.
would.
Like I say,
They wouldn't get the revenue then.
EMS in general is not a profitable, I don't know how the privates do it, but how they're substituted. Yeah, there's a lot of, you get downstate, there's a lot of private companies
Yeah.
that are in the EMS that contract to cities. And they survive, so I mean, I don't know what they're paying their people or how they're doing it, but they seem to survive. But generally, it's certainly not a money-making proposition. You're lucky to break even, and depending on the demographics of the area you're serving, you may or may not break even, so.
I was just thinking if they'd store one in our facility and they man it.
I don't think they have enough to go around
That's
to store in
my
our
question,
facility.
I guess, to
We're
start
moving
with.
it from one side of the county to the other.
I know they
That's-
station one at the state police post, and they've got, up at Bell, and they've got here, and, so it's just,
I was just thinking the same way we were talking about a snowplow,
Yeah.
storing it here, would, use it, they use it, All right, forget it.
well, it's good, I mean, it's good discussion. I mean, it's
Well,
a
yeah.
good concept. There's nothing wrong with the concept. It's just, when you're doing something like that where you have a private for-profit operation that's
Right.
operating it, and,
It's different
and they don't want to give that revenue up, and, they do want to shift the liability to somebody else, so it's kind of an octopus.
Well, I was
with a
just
lot of
thinking
tentacles
what
on it.
John said over too,
Oh, yeah.
they expect this and they demand it from us, and I just thought of a different way of assuring them that we're here, we're taking care of you and stuff like that, so.
Oh, it is, yeah, there is definitely a service demand, there's no question about it. It's like police, fire, ambulance, medical, when you need it, you want it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Go ahead.
Following up on the conversation, this is probably about the first time we've had any type of conversation on this at all. I think we need to put together some data, some background as to what has happened and what's happening now and what we foresee in the future, and some of the options that we may have available to us in that, how it's going to affect the community as a whole in that. And some of the things we're seeing right now that's affecting the community. You're talking about ambulance services and that, and I happened to be in a position in the last week to see how that works in that. One ambulance was there and they got a call and they couldn't handle it and that. So it's things like this here that I think our residents need to know what's happening out there and what has happened, what's happening now, and what we foresee in the future, so that they can get a feel of it. I don't believe this board or this township is in a position to get into the ambulance business at this point in time, but we need to do what we can for our residents as we move forward in that. What that is, I can't tell you, because I don't know.
Well,
on that.
some of it is expanding the EMS capabilities, and I think we could do that. And maybe break even or whatever. We've got an income source then too, to help fund,
Well,
you know, the.
Along Ernie's line, the unique thing that some departments are doing, I don't honestly believe we have the daytime staffing where we can split it, but a lot of fire departments, even if they're not in the transport business, are providing home care assistance, meaning they'll come do the blood pressure, do the basic twice a week survey of the patient that they're paying for, or health care, or they're trying to get other people to come in for.
Well, checks.
And there's departments that have done that, and it's obviously the community, you know, is more than willing. And we've always, over the years, there's been a number of patients in the township that we just sort of adopted, knowing that they were living alone and had limited resources, and we would go do a blood pressure check for them and blood sugar check and things like that. We just haven't advertised it, and we haven't made a formal program of it. But you know, when the need was there and they didn't have another resource, they had transportation issues getting to the hospital, we've helped out for a couple of weeks. You know, one of them is a former firefighter in the department that is living alone now and has some health care issues. So
I'd like to see us expand the EMS side of it, and I think we could do that, especially with another person on staff. I think we need to have that discussion.
yeah, you'll see the minimum qualifications we would ask for in that position would be a firefighter, 2 operations level of hazmat, and then an EMT would be the basic we would look at. So we didn't have to train. I would foresee within a year or 2 of his hire, we would have him become a certified fire inspector so he could operate alone. Otherwise, he'd have to have Rob or I with him to go out and to do inspections.
So we'll probably see this next year. I want to talk a little bit about the budget.
Yeah, just one thing, when you talk about a new position in that, my past in business and that and everything else, putting together job responsibility is fine. You also want to start with the responsibility and justification for even moving in that direction, and I think that's one thing to put together, so we know we are, not only us, but the community, that we're adding a position. Why is it necessary? And if you have the justification and the rationale in front of you, you can move on it. Then you have the job responsibilities at the same time, following up in that. So that's the direction I'd like to see go in that too. I'm not against the position, but I think this is the steps we need to follow through on this stuff.
There's,
The department has done a 5-year.
I'll make you a copy. There it is right there. There's the rationale and the justification for it.
And we've documented over
Like that.
the last 5 years, the call volume and the times that the calls have come in.
How many are coming and showing, yeah.
Dan, did you have something?
Well, I hate to be the one to
Was hoping you'd raise your hand.
start throwing stuff in here, but,
Okay.
and
Not all
this
one-
has nothing to do with the fire department whatsoever. My rationale for budget is basically a data input on the budget. So I don't have the data from 2010 to 2015, so my data is basically all from the request that I had for the runs for up to this point in time. And going over the runs, I also we don't have any data on the number of people that actually responded to each one of the runs, so it's kind of hard to even go with that one. But I'm going to go with the basic. I think we had 217 runs with this report. Out of that, 79 of those runs were in the time frame where you were actually at the hall, or your time frame of 8 to 4:30. Out of those 79 runs, 47 of them were EMS, which is 59% of the runs are EMS. Per the SOP, and as you've said, made a motion already, that 2 people can make an EMS run. And in fact, if you and Rob are out on separate things, I'm assuming you both make the run to the hall. So having this third person there, again, he can't at that point in time, he can't go anywhere until you have enough to man a truck. And the same with any kind of extrication or firefighting or anything like that. The SOP, I believe, says four persons on the truck to go. So even if he was there, that's 3 of you, and you're still gonna have to wait for somebody else to get there. Now, whether or not one person gets there right away and then 3 other people get there 20 minutes later, I don't know. But again, like I said, I don't have anything concerning how many people actually made the calls. So my rationale on that would be, I guess I'd have to question the need for one more person. Like I said, most of your runs were EMS and most of the runs were handled by 2 people. Being that aside, I look at how your budget is created and where you're getting the money to pay for this extra person. And the only way I seem to find that is the fact that Manager Gerard has taken away $60,000 of your income to go back to the township, which I guess I'm kind of surprised at, because if I remember back in December, I believe, of 2014, I remember then Supervisor Limita demanding that the fire department pay $80,000 to the water fund. In fact, to the point where we spent, I think, $12,500 or maybe more than that, I'm not even sure, on a rate study. And when it came back, Supervisor Limita was disappointed that the rate study didn't show how much money the fire department should pay. So the $80,000 remained there. That being said, Manager Gerard stated that he wants to go ahead and do another study to find out how much money the fire department should pay. And if at that point in time, if it comes back to $80,000, where are you going to get the money to pay for this person in 2018?
When that time comes. We have new developments coming on. Our budget, the dark stores are hurting us like everybody else. But I'm hoping that we are going to maintain a large portion of that money, because I personally felt that in the beginning that was more money than was justified to be transferred for the return that we were getting back on it, the hydrant service or whatever. I didn't agree with it at the time, and I expressed that. But
Well, I don't think anybody agreed at the time. In fact, it was a demand. And like I said, it was a demand. You also have to realize in 4 years, our balloon payment for the loan is going to be up. And no one's going to know exactly what kind of rate we're going to have in 4 years, which is going to put another strain on your budget. I guess I just want to throw these out there. This is my questions, and also the fact that, I understand people keep saying, you know, well, our run volume's up, but I really believe that the run volume is pretty close to what it was last year, if I'm not mistaken. Perhaps more people are showing up, and I can give you one scenario of why you don't get the response during the day time, and the way I think anyway, is the fact that again, like I said, 36% of our calls are EMS assists, and we all know that if the 2 of you go, everybody's going to be coming. Anybody that comes in there is going to be sitting there. You know, so maybe a lot of people don't do it during that time of the day. As for when you're either one or both of you are out of the not working that day, I believe you do try to get somebody in there and you pay them for that time that they're there. And I understand, again, I'm just throwing this out here, the fact that emergency responses of a fire or anything else, we all know that we are mutual aid, and we have mutual aid with the city as well as Chalkley Sands and Nagani. So it's not that, I mean, they're a call away the same way that they call us. In fact, some of our calls during the day were mutual aids to those places as well as Power. So I'm just throwing that out there for my questions. My
I guess I
concerns.
can respond a little bit to that. I mean, the situation we're facing right now with the potential of going to full-time is no different than the situation we faced in 2014 when we increased from 32 to 35 and equipped 3 additional and trained 3 additional. It's no different than that. We're basically recognizing a change in need, change in demand, and a change in the way we wish to respond to that for the public. And, and the chief and I, it's our opinion, and, you don't have to agree with it. That's fine. The board members don't have to agree with it, but I'm looking at it from a liability standpoint. I don't want to be the one that you ask, how come we didn't have 3 people to respond to that car accident out there and save that person?
Well,
I want to have that third person there to be able to run that piece of equipment regardless of whether it's needed every minute of the day or not. That 1 minute that it is, I want it there. And that's my rationale.
Well, my comment to that would be simply the fact that you went from 32 to 35 is a volunteer group. You're going to a full-time person, which now includes benefits, which is increased. And as to the fact that that third person can go to a scene, that's not available.
But
By
that
our
third
SOP,
person-
you cannot run 3 people in a truck.
But that third
So if you're going to
person
go
is
against
there-
our SOP, you're going to have to change your SOP.
But that third person is there if those 2 are gone to have that piece of equipment ready to go out the door when the other 2 arrive. Not that they
Other
have
than to
then
start
get
up a
ready.
truck, I don't know what else to be ready.
Say
We're
again?
using a third person now with
No.
Janelle out of the office.
Yeah.
Her responsibilities are gonna be improved and changed, so she's gonna spend more time. She won't have the time to just get up and leave, so.
But again, I'm just quoting the fact that an EMS assist is 2 people that go.
I understand.
So the third person is going to sit there. If both people are in the hall, I suppose if all 3 of you are in the hall, you can go. But again, many times we know that both trucks are out and they each respond in that truck. So that third person is going to be sitting there in the hall. Is it an advantage to have him there? It's 1 more, but he's not going to be able to do nothing until 3 more people show up. So
The other part of that EMS side too, I think when we talked, if we went to that next level of EMS, then we could charge for some of that stuff too, that would be going on, and we'd have more, what's the word? We'd be able to do more at the scene, isn't that right?
Well, yeah, you would get transport mileage, you would get flat rate for the call, a BLS call, and then any consumables you used at the scene on the patient en route to the hospital is all billable as well.
Which we don't have the availability to do that now.
No,
Because we
we
don't. So
can't,
we're
because
going
we
on
don't
EMS
transport,
calls anyway?
we can't bill.
We're going on EMS calls anyway, and if we went to that next level of covering all EMS, then we could help fund some of that too. But that's still in the future.
We bill for car accidents
Yes,
For non-residents, yes.
for non-residents?
no,
Those that are at fault.
technically we bill all people,
Yeah. Those that are at fault, deemed to be at fault of the accident.
but we don't really bill.
You don't, we're not there for nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting something back.
Yep.
We need to look at the money part of this. That's what I wanted everybody to have their comment time. I was kind of hoping it would be 10 minutes less, but that's all right. What questions do we have on the budget itself? We talked about some of that a little bit with the $80,000 that was brought up. I'm curious about some of these numbers with education and training. We've only actually spent $920 so far. Is it a $6,000 budget because you spend more of it in the fall, like now, even though it looks like we haven't
Well,
run
and
it up that high?
we have no way of knowing how many people are going to take advantage of the UPMS conference. Rob and I, because of staffing, we didn't go to the spring fire inspector conferences in the last couple of years like we normally would have done. We've got money in there also for bringing training to the station that we haven't expended yet this year. I mean, we just haven't had the time to split it. The other thing, when we look at the firefighters that come to the station, when we're out, unfortunately, there hasn't been as many, but the bottom line is when we're out on those calls, we're sometimes, depending on the nature of the call, we'll get asked to go in the ambulance to assist in the back to the hospital. So I would hope that anyone that's available is coming to the station, because that's the whole idea of them coming when we're out on EMS calls.
Should have a
That they're, and we have had over the years many instances, I can get you the statistics if you want, where we've been running 2 calls simultaneously. It's not that unusual to have that happen. It's not an everyday occurrence or an every week occurrence, but that is the whole idea of having those people back. I would hope if they were home and available, they would have come to the station. And they
Okay.
generally do come to the station.
So you want to leave that, you've got $6,000 that you're recommending for, like I said, you only spent 920 this year, that's a huge difference. So you're thinking it's a multiple things.
Yep, that's only
What you're
through
doing in
June.
the fall and all the conferences and stuff.
Well, we'll generally bring somebody in. We've had ITLS, the trauma course that we've put on about every other year at the fire station, which allows our EMT people, you're able to garnish a huge amount of points, but we have to pay the instructor and all the staff that come in to do both the lecture and the skill stations. And so we keep that money in, and as you've seen this year, it's nice to have a little money in some of those funds if we don't use all the training, because we have transferred all over the fund this year to try to balance out the maintenance in the other areas where we ran over.
Rob wanted to add something.
I believe the numbers we're looking at are also from June.
Yes.
Right, yeah, you take that and double it, basically, is
Yeah.
what we do. Yep.
Do we have all our uniforms? All the uniforms? They all
We
ordered
have-
and paid for and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, we have bought, and in fact, we got some really nice positive comments back at the fire prevention thing, because all of our staff are now, they do have a duty uniform that is exactly like Rob is wearing there. So and we have expended some on that, but yep, we do.
Okay. Yes, Ernie.
A couple of questions on revenue. On 626, you got an increase of, which is charges for service rendered. You're going from budget of 87 up to 12.5. What do you anticipate the additional revenue to be coming from?
Well, whatever the revenue comes in from, we're able to bill for some of the car accidents, insurance companies. I mean, we basically bill for whatever expendables we use at the scenes, dry all. You know, and we have a base charge for each apparatus. But again, that fund is purely dependent on the amount of vehicle accidents that, you know, and that in the revenue stream for, so.
Okay.
And basically, when I looked at that, I went back over prior years, and we were looking at an average, basically. You know, we see in 2014, it was 25,000. In 2015, it was 12,000. 7,000 in 2013, and it bounces all over the place, and we're just basically trying to cover that base.
We bill for dry all, the consumables that we put down to dry the road. And we don't, I should say, we refer to a billing company in Houghton. And it's nice because they're both a billing and they're a collection company. And there's some of those, Ernie, we go 4 and 5 years as we get $50 here, $75 there, but eventually we recover, you know, probably 80% of our bills that we run through that company. Some people declare bankruptcy or just disappear off the map and we can't find them. But
So that number could change quite a bit.
Another question is, reading through on buildings and ground, your repair and maintenance, you come up with 7,000, the manager comes with 24,700. Facade,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
some of the stonework, the grouting is coming out of it, and I'm indicating that some of that's going to be covered by warranty by the people that did it. So we're not going to eat the full $7,000 cost.
that building is so new, I was really,
That's
when
why.
I saw that, I was wondering, wait a minute, what's going on there?
Basically, what we're talking about there is over the doors, the large stone pieces and the arch over the door, the grouting in those is not holding up. And those are going to need to be redone.
see, I tend to vote to budget for the worst case scenario.
Dan, you had something?
Well, I was going to start, I don't know how we're going to handle this. Are we going to go, is this just questions concerning the
I
narratives?
was just looking at this and I just kind of going down the line, but yeah, whatever you have, I want to kind of nail down the money part of it.
Well, yeah, that's what I was just kind of wondering if we're going to go through the narrative or not. I mean, also that $7,000 to repair the motor, or that the motor was falling apart the first year we had that. So as far as I'm concerned, that should be something that the contractor eats. There's no excuse whatsoever for that, but
Well, I'd like to interject, we need to find a better contractor then, because we've had it repaired. We had it repaired from the second year that we moved in, and it falls out again, and we've had it repaired, and it falls out again, and then the mortar didn't match the mortar that was originally put in. So there's a long history to the mortar on this building and the issues we've had, so. Hopefully it'll come in, you know, we'll be able to get it under a warranty. I don't know how long mortar is warranted for, I guess.
More than 2 or 3 years.
I would hope.
Go ahead, if you've got something. Like I said, I was just using this format, but if you want to look at the narrative, that's fine.
Well, you know, the narrative kind of follows the budget, so I don't know, it's just, you know. Do you want all my questions for the narrative, or you just want to go
Sure,
to each one of
whatever.
the
I mean, that's
narratives?
what we're
I just
talking
have.
about. I wasn't sure how many questions we had.
Okay, well, starting out under administration 704, salary appointed officials, you state 15,690, which is a decrease 3,404, but that's actually 2016. You actually increased it $3,707 to 19,000 plus in 2017. I'm just curious why.
Yeah, I had a $3,700 difference too. Is that a number you came up with? Yeah, it didn't make sense.
Well, as I said previously, we went back over prior years and are trying to come up with bringing the budget into line to what averages are. And if you look at 13 and 14, you'll see what the average that was spent was. I don't want to have to come back to the board looking for more money. If we don't expend it, it'll be available for other purposes within the department. But if you go back and look at the years, you know, there's a lot of flexibility. It depends on how many activities occur, what happens, how much call there is, and that's why. Simple as that.
No,
My
it wasn't the
basic
number,
question,
Dan. It's not the total number you're talking about.
my basic question is the fact that the narrative doesn't reflect what the budget says, and the other end of that is the fact that it was raised $3,700, is that because you want to increase pay to the salary appointed officials? That's my question. It's not so much what happened in 10 through 14.
Yeah, the salary is based on how much their demand is, basically. And what I'm looking at is what an average demand has been.
But salary appointed officials are the officers, is that not correct?
That's right.
And they have a set amount of money they get every month?
Mhm.
So that's why I'm asking you, it's this $3,700 increase. Do you plan on increasing their pay, is what I'm asking.
If you look at the 6 month in June, it's $8,000 already.
The salary appointed officials is the pay per month for each officer, correct? That never changes. That stays whatever it is, correct? The assistant chief gets X amount of money, the chief gets X amount of money, the captains get X amount of money, and the lieutenants get X amount of money. That's per month. So that should remain the same every year unless you plan on increasing those wages. And that's why I'm asking, with the $3,700, is it an increase in the wages for those officers?
No, it's not intended to be, no.
Then why is it there?
Again, I'm averaging out. We are bringing the budget into compliance. Every year, the budget bounces around. There's never been any question about the fire department budget historically in the past. We're simply trying to put the budget into a place where we believe it's going to be.
I'm asking simply the
I
fact
answered you
that
simply.
No.
Yes,
337704 is salary appointed officials.
That's correct.
Which is salary that is a set amount of money per officer per month for the 12 months. Now, you've increased it $3,700. So are you increasing those set amounts per month to the officers?
no, but for your same question, then why is it different in 13, 14, and 15?
I
And
don't
16?
understand why you don't understand what I'm asking.
I understand what you're asking. I'm answering your question. You're taking a
So-
position that it has to be consistent all the time.
They are.
I'm showing you in
They
the
are.
budget that it's not.
They are.
Why isn't it?
And why is 13, 14, 15, and 16 different?
Probably because there was increases in the pay for those. Every year they changed them, instead of $100, they gave them $110. That's
not
why I'm
accurate.
asking you,
That's
why
not
is,
accurate, because it has not increased. It increased once since I've been here.
Okay, so maybe that's the lowest question. We need to figure out why that number's different. If in 2015 it was 16,000, we're estimating 15 now, and it's going up to 19, the narrative says it's decreasing 3,400. It's not decreasing, it's going up 3,700. It was part of my notes to ask too. So if the firefighters are getting, those particular ones are getting a set wage, period, why would that number change?
Went down in 2015 because there were some months that a fire chief did not get paid. We did not have a position for a fire chief.
Okay, that makes sense. So
Okay,
why
but that-
wouldn't the department request this year be the same as it was last, or, well, it would have been at least 14. It should have the same number as 14 then, unless we actually change it.
Well, I'm assuming that the fire chief still isn't getting that pay, but that means that, again, like I said, the narrative shows salary appointed officials 15,609, decreased 3,404 because the fire chief and fire marshal's position have been combined. That was 2016. Now in 2017, the same narrative is here for the 2017, but we have a $3,700 increase. So if the 2016 is 15,690 because of the fire chief and fire marshal positions being combined, there should, unless you are giving a raise to all the officers, that should remain the same.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the increase shows up under the fire marshal category in the
That's where
narrative.
the increase is. for
Under
the
fire,
additional
it actually shows up
Right.
under administrative.
So it shouldn't be under administration. The amounts asked for should still be 18,720, unless we haven't changed it.
I don't have a problem with changing it. The $1,000 isn't gonna matter in the budget.
Right. Dan's just looking for the rationale, that's all, because the numbers should be consistent. It makes sense. But there
fine.
is a $3,700 difference too. Maybe the narrative wasn't updated. That's possible
I
too.
didn't generate the narrative, so I
Right,
can't tell
that's
you.
Ron.
Question.
Yeah, that could very well be a typo in the narrative.
I know you were struggling with that document anyway, you said, because it's not a decrease of 3,400, it's an increase of 37.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep,
what we would
exactly.
decide to do with that number, we can decide that. It's,
Well, and actually, if I go through the narrative, I find this in many places. 710, for instance, media and training, $10,000, $2,500 increase. That actually occurred in 16, not 17. If you look at 710, you'll see that $10,000 was actually in 2016. It just remains the same in 2017. Social Security, that's the same Social Security you had in 2016. Workers' compensation, that's the same workers' compensation you had in 2016. Actually, if you were, phone charges, 3,000, on number 850, phone charges 3,000, no change, but actually you decreased to $2,000. Travel and conference, 5,000, plus or minus $50, but actually it was an increase of $500. I can go on. It's, printing and publishing. It's just a confusing narrative, looking from the narrative to the actual budget.
yep, I noticed that too. Do we need to maybe go back and look at this again? The numbers, the actual numbers? I think Ernie had his hand up first.
I'm just looking at, following up on Dan. The question raised, when you go back to 13 and 14, you got 18,720. And now we're talking about 19. The question I have, do we have the same number of officers today that we had back in 13 and 14? And the next question is, are they being paid the same dollar amount today as they are back then?
I think that answer
Not
is
in
yes.
13 and 14.
If they're all the same, then you have to, then what you're talking about, you're following back in 13 and 14, which is 18,720. If that's the case, you're looking at 18,720, you follow right down to the Social Security, workman's comp, everything else follows all the way down there then. So the figures you have for the current year have to be readjusted to what their rationale should be.
Actually, the way I look at it is it's not actually the 13 and 14. You have to actually look at the 16 because that's where the decrease came because of the combine of the two. So that 15,690 is where I'm thinking we should be.
But I raised the question is, we have the same number of officers, and the question was, are they getting paid the same? If they're not getting paid the same, then there's an adjustment that has to be made in that. So you're looking at a point in time of 13 and 14 and moving forward on that. One is,
Even actual, if you look at actual, it should be somewhere around 16,000, which is
Okay.
closer to 15's total.
by
So
asking,
those
answering the
numbers-
question and answering, you're gonna come up with those figures in that too.
Yeah.
Same number of people, but less dollars, so you have to redo the computations and all the way down the line.
So I think the department and managers' recommendations are just off a little bit. So we got $1,000 in there to play with, if I'm looking at it right. Lois, does that sound right to you? We've got about $1,000 difference, or if you're following the flow? Yeah. Okay, does that kind of answer that? Randy, you had something?
Yeah, assuming some of these department requests and manager recommends are with the additional position, correct?
Well, not in this line item,
No.
No,
Yeah.
but in the other ones that were discussed
On the other.
previously.
yes.
So that's, I think that's why some of the adjustments were there, predicated on an additional position over the previous. So then maybe that would answer that question.
Two additional staff people that should come on, you know, the part-time.
You only base this on one though, right?
Yep. No, I'm talking, we're also looking at hiring, we have two
Two.
open positions.
Oh, for,
Yeah,
yeah, those
part-time.
two,
We're at,
yeah.
we're at 33 right now,
So
we're
the
authorized
budget's
35.
based on one full-time,
Yeah,
one
one,
FTE,
Two parts.
plus bumping your current roster to 35.
Mhm.
That still wouldn't change the appointed officials
No.
number if we're talking
No,
about the same
no.
number of people.
But the other ones it would.
So that would go in line then with social security and everything. That would make sense.
And the minute you change dollar amounts for salaries, social security changes and that.
Small amounts.
And this is a guesstimate anyway, you know, for some of this. is.
Workman's comp figures in there too, because that's on dollar amount at the same time.
Yeah, it's a very small percentage.
Yeah, and some of the payroll, and all we can do is look at prior years, average it out, and try to take our best, you know, run volume, we have no control over it. It is what it is, so.
Dan, did you have anything else? I don't know that if I cut you off or you were trying to make a point between the narrative and the,
Yeah, well, it is the narrative, I mean, under fire protection, we still have $80,000, no change, but actually we still have $80,000, no change in the fire protection, but actually it's still, it's 20,000. So, I mean, the narrative and the figures in the narrative don't reflect what's actually in the budget. That's what the confusion factor was.
okay,
Well, it doesn't reflect what's in my recommendation, no, because I'm not following it
sure. the
necessarily the narrative. You know, and to explain it, we've changed our position on the public water supply. We're splitting it, you know, among 3 different units. And that is reflected in the budget.
Yeah, I know Ron came in and said, oh, he was having software trouble with that narrative. I've got a recommendation for that for next year too. I think might be easier for everybody instead of writing all of that.
Yeah, we left for the fire inspectors conference, which we had to go for CEUs, and we struggled with the formatting of this narrative throughout the whole thing, so it got changed, rechanged, and changed and rechanged a half dozen times.
Yeah, and you resubmitted another one too.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any other line item issues, questions? Repair, that was one of mine too.
I think the question on the fire protection on the 20,000 rather than the 80,000 in that, part has been explained, but then you're talking about splitting it between the different departments and that.
Correct.
Can someone give me some rationale why the split?
Yeah, basically what that amounts to is, you know, the fire department, you know, has challenged and had issue with that $80,000 all along, and the water supply study that was done, the joint water rate study between the city and the township, does not calculate that and had not calculated that in the past. So the calculation of what would be a reasonable participation of the fire department is going to be done separately from that. And in the interim for this year, Superintendent Page typically transfers $23,000 to the general fund. I contributed that $23,000 towards the 80. Superintendent Page is taking, I believe it's $37,000 out of Public Works and $20,000 from the fire department. So we've decided for this year, pending that study, that report coming back, that's how we would handle it this year. to not
We
put
need
the
to
full
talk about
burden on the
that
fire
study.
department.
We haven't done that. That's.
No, I know, that's
on
on my agenda too.
Yeah, yeah, I keep saying that. Gotta find time to do that. That answer the question?
Dan, you got more?
No, just in case that $80,000 comes back, I'd just like to know where we're gonna get to pay this person. Because that's basically where the most of the money to pay this extra person is coming from, is that reduction of that public.
And maybe we can keep doing this going forward. I don't know. We still really need to talk about, is the 2.5 mils gonna be enough? I don't know. Not today, but
Well, you can only go 2.5 mils for, under Public Act 33, so.
what else have we got?
All other questions.
Those were the only ones I had. I picked up on that same thing Dan did, and we might have another 1,000 or so if we go back to the
1 to 2.
16.4. Anything else? Should we release him?
It's a good time for a break.
Yeah. Do you have anything, Ron, you want to add or
Nope.
question us? Okay,
If the board does want to take a break right now, you're
that'd be good.
being delivered.
Are we gonna be asking, for a cleanup of the?
Yes, you will get one.
Between the two, okay, if we're going to be doing that, wouldn't it be best served if we were to establish whether or not the board was supportive of the adoption of the new position or not? That would help when you make the cleanup.
Well, typically what occurs, and I know this is really the first time you've been through this budget process, but typically what occurs is after these meetings, we do a revised budget and send it back out to the board so you can reinsert that in your binder. And then you'll have that information. But, the question that you're asking at this point is a question that typically comes up at the final stages of the budget in terms of what is it that is actually going to be put forward by the township board at the public hearing.
This is a
Seems to me.
It's up to you. You can do it either way.
Helpful for.
Sure.
If I were making the budget, to know in advance whether or not the board was supportive of the request for the new position.
Mhm.
That would put it into a better package, more prepared for the final.
Until,
Review.
typically where I will do this with the budget is until the board says no to something, I continue to put it in.
Okay.
And my next comment was gonna be, how does the board feel about this budget? Do we need to look at it again? Is there consensus that we agree with it? That was gonna be my next question. Do we need to have him come back? Is there something he needs to change? Do we flat out say no? There's no extra person, we're not gonna do that, and we send it back to him. So that was gonna be my end to this session for him. Yes, Randy?
My end of the session is, this board can agree all they want or disagree, but ultimately, this board does not have the final decision on this budget. It will be the new board, because the new board is
True.
in office November 20th. Our public hearing is in December. The new board will be seated by then. They will have the ultimate say on this budget. So I agree with John's comments, but it might be premature because the new board's going to ultimately have the final say on this new budget.
Yeah, so this is just like a rough draft. We usually just kind of, like Randy said, go through this and,
I think we should just leave it in there, because I agree. I think the information that we received and the comments, I think we should leave it in there, because I think it's necessary that we follow through with that extra person.
so that's my question then. Are we good on this? Do we,
I think we're good.
I don't
or at
have any
least for now?
problems. I
We
don't
can
have any
always have him come back. We can always change it.
Well, I'm gonna obviously redo the narrative with some help, I hope, from
happy
somebody
to
that's
help if
better
you
with,
I think also the documentation for the administration under 337 we redo those figures and that, so. we
Yeah, I've
come
got
up-
that. Well, you'll get a revised.
And like Randy said, after the 8th of November,
20th,
20th,
after the 20th,
the
21st.
20th, noon on the 20th.
noon on the 20th.
We formatted the 15 file?
All right, let's take a break. Need a break. Thanks, guys, for coming in.
Thanks, Ron.
Good, John? Okay, thank you. All right, we're back. We're gonna talk general fund now. And one of those modules involves the assessing department. And Ms. Dulcie is going to give us a lot of information. I said, you know, this is way above most people's head. Try to gear it to like a fourth grader. And she rolled her eyes, which is totally fine. But maybe general fund wise, Randy, do you wanna, now that you have your mouth full, I'm sorry, do you wanna
That's the
kinda
best time to ask.
give an overview? Delsey's got lots to tell us.
We'll jump back to the.
Turn your microphone on, Randy.
Jump back to the general fund tab. We didn't spend much time about the narrative and the background on the narrative, which, if this is being recorded for televising, may be of interest in terms of how we calculated what the income might be. Dulcie and I worked pretty closely together on it in terms of looking at where the taxable value should be, where the taxable value currently is with regard to the dark store decisions, and where it may be depending upon what happens with the Senate in their lame duck session. And we took a position, again, a conservative approach with regard to revenue, and then based upon that revenue projection, constructed the general fund budget. Taking into consideration things like the 30% increase in electricity, the 0.25% return on investments in terms of the interest rate, those factors that we take into consideration. We did not take into consideration at that point some of the issues that in June were unknowns, and to some extent still are, and those being what the health insurance premiums would be, the renewal premiums, what the national impact on health insurance is going to be following the election on November 8th. It may have a dramatic impact on where we go in that direction. Although it may not be in 2017, it may carry over into 18 before we know what's happening with the fallout from the election in the congressional elections, and not just the president. But we took all those things into consideration to come up with a revenue stream. The general fund incorporates all of the major service operations of the township: planning, zoning, treasury, assessing, building and grounds, general services administration, township improvements, our law enforcement contract. Used to include the library, which has now been broken out in a separate fund. And several other smaller funds that break out. Dulcie is here this evening to talk about some of the impacts on assessing and some of the decisions that we need to have from the board through this budget process. And Jason is also here to address the planning and zoning side of it. Now, historically, there has been a position that's been shared by the planning zoning department and the Treasury Assessing Department, and that position has been held by Janelle Ruff. Originally, it was a technician position. About almost 4 years ago now, Supervisor Leamington, in his role as the chief assessor, indicated that he wanted to restructure the assessing department in particular to ensure that we were capitalizing on our taxation, having properties on the tax roll as they properly should be, ensuring that we captured properties that are not currently on the tax roll that should be, and that we corrected deficiencies that had resulted from prior assessments. And in that vein, it began a process for our deputy treasurer assessor to upgrade to a higher level of assessor, and to have the technician position upgrade to a basic assessor level so they could operate independently, was the long-term theory. We are there now. Janelle just received her MCAO certification, so she is now essentially a level 1 assessor and is able to operate independently now, doing tax assessing and doing property valuations. So as of January 1st, she would, under my proposal, she would go full-time instead of half-time to the deputy treasurer assessing side and would be opening a half-time position in the planning department, which I am proposing to fill with a full-time position as a staff planner that would allow the planner and zoning administrator to pursue some major projects that the township board has placed some importance on, asset management for one with the new road project, as well as furthering our recreation plan and our zoning operations, and to provide a lower level position to handle the more routine aspects of the planning and zoning department, such as the preliminary site plan reviews, dealing with permit applications and those types of issues with developing projects. And I had sent out to the board members a breakout basically of what those duties would be for that staff planner. We have incorporated the funding for that into the budgets, and that is primarily the major change in the general fund, is that structure of staffing in the most part. Now, Dulcie is here to speak on behalf of her budget. Jason is also here to speak on behalf of his budget, and unless board members have any specific questions for me, I would pass the microphone to them.
Anything for Randy before we hear from Dulcie? Nope, okay, go ahead.
Part of the responsibilities as the assessor for the township, I am required by statute to establish market value for all properties within our jurisdiction. Market value then is divided in half, because Michigan's a 50% state, which established the assessed value for all parcels in Marquette Township. Part of the procedures in order to be able to do that is we are required by state law to visit 20% of all parcels yearly. So within 5 years, all properties have been visited by our department, and while we're on site, we remeasure everything, we take brand new pictures, and we then look to make sure that we have it properly classed and that all of the information on the property is properly reflected on the record card, because that determines their rate of taxation. We are being reviewed by the State Tax Commission, and you've heard it probably in the public and in the media about the AMAR reviews, which is an acronym for Auditing Minimum Assessing Requirements. There are different sections that are reviewed by a field staff from the State Tax Commission, and they determine our accuracy and how well we're properly valuing and following the state law and state statutes. We just recently, last year, had went under our AMAR, and we had a couple of discrepancies that we have been correcting due to our corrective action that we submitted and was approved. Part of that was to make sure that we had parcels out of override so they would be naturally calculating based on what was physically there. We have completed all that field work, and we're doing real well on keeping good with our corrective action. The question that I get asked when I had first mentioned that we didn't have enough staff in our department to be able to do this was beyond just the AMAR. The 20% and the functions that we do on a day-to-day basis are continual. We have the same assessment cycle that takes place every year. So it's not a matter of just getting all of our parcels to the point that they were being accurate for the AMAR. It's a continual. We'll have to do this every year, go through different sections of the township. It takes up a lot of staff time because you're never completely done with assessing and doing your field work. Do you have any questions? I mean, are you following me to this point?
We're doing fine.
Okay.
Some of what she's working on too, or they're working on, is cleanup from what had happened in years past when the AMAR, I don't know how long ago that hit, last year probably, because you've been working on this all year. There were some deficiencies. There were some serious deficiencies that were not either reported or calculated or whatever that they're trying to get taken care of, and out of 900 and some
Parcels that
issues,
were in override, we have it down
they're down to
to,
like 400 as of the review date. and
Correct.
Now you're below that already.
correct.
So they're kicking it. They're getting out there to try to justify and rectify all the properties that have either been not documented correctly or weren't on there at all.
One of the big things, just to back up what Lynn was stating, is if we're going to be going through any type of an appeal process, whether it be at the local board of review, or if a resident or a commercial property is still unhappy with the resolution at that level, they have the opportunity to go to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. Well, part of my responsibility is to make sure that if we're going to get challenged as a township, it better be based on fact. So part of this is to make sure that we didn't transpose any numbers when we were entering the appraisal, that we had proper information with the acreage, or that we had the right construction class when you're looking at the property. Same as foundation type, occupancy, everything that we look at, because if we're going to go to an appeal, I want to make sure it's based on fact. And then if they still don't agree with us, they have every right to go through those additional steps to be able to find resolution to their problem. But I owe that to the rest of the taxpayers and to the board, and also my own ethics as an assessor, that it's based on fact. So when we're going through, it's more just to make sure that the field work could be 100% accurate, but it has to get from the field work into the computer so it'll be generating the right assessments. What we're finding is the BSA software that we utilize for our assessments is pretty much the state standard. There's a couple other vendors that utilize it, but when you go through each individual field in the areas in which you can enter in either percent adjustments or any type of a factor, if you're not aware where to find that, you could have all your information correctly, and then when you're going through an AMAR review and they print reports that you are not aware you can print to find those discrepancies, that's how we found out we had inaccuracies on some of the overrides and a couple of flat valued items. So those are very helpful tools in order for us to make sure that everything that we have is going to be accurate and can be defendable should any conflict come up.
When you go out to these properties, do you go alone?
No, I always go out with another person, not only for my own safety, but in my coworkers' safety, but also for if there is ever something that would occur out in the field. It also protects, the witness or, the resident, where we can just say, well, we're not going to go inside the home, or whatever the reason would be. It is not good policy to go out by yourself.
That's good. I'm just a little concerned about that. And what problems do you come up when you go out? Do you have any problem not getting in the property or getting off, say get out of my property or something like that, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, typically when we go to a person's home or on their property, we'll introduce ourselves and explain it. We have a really good community for realizing that is our requirements with the state. And I use that as an educational opportunity to explain what we do. We look over the field card. I ask them, this is what we're basing it on, and try to do my best, because I think a lot of conflict arises from not understanding how the process works. So we'll take that time and explain why we're there. We don't go inside homes. You don't look inside windows. It's only based on your observation on what you can do. And if somebody is not home at the time, we will knock, we will leave a business card, or we will continue to do the appraisal from the outside.
Are they notified ahead of time that you're coming?
Yes, we did a mailing last year that it indicated which areas we were going to be in. We try to always allow the resident or the business owner to schedule an appointment time where they can sit down with us so we can go through everything.
Dan?
You stated that we had to do 20% a year for 5 years. Have we made that at all, or for this year, have we done 20%?
We didn't quite make the full 20%. With our responsibilities for still covering the front desk due to various staff members being on vacation, it hindered that some. Mm-hmm. But we'll just add whatever deficiency we came up on that 20% to the next year. So next year, if we might have to do 25% that first year to get us back on track.
Okay.
So we need to cancel all vacations now and just get rid of them?
Yeah, just don't tell my
That's all
coworkers that came from me.
How do we handle someone who's upset in that? I know here sometimes they come in and you sort of back away if they get all upset and start hollering and so?
Not at all. You just don't take it personal.
Okay,
You find out what they're upset about,
okay,
you know, and address it. You base it on fact. You try to take as much emotion out of it as you can.
okay.
And if they're still not happy, they have different venues that they can go to find their satisfaction, either through the board of review or through the tribunal. But typically, if you show what you're basing it on, they may not like it, but at least they understand there's a system in place, that it's not just a, you know, dartboard practice.
I'm a little concerned going out, by yourself, that's why I asked you. You should never go out alone on something like that.
Well, there are some visits, although there aren't many, but there are some visits where we would coordinate with the sheriff's deputy,
Okay.
particularly some of the more remote outlying areas where we've had some issues in the past, just to ensure that it doesn't occur. It's not often, that doesn't happen often.
I just think safety is very important,
It's like anything else. Anytime the government comes around, it's like, yeah, really, the government's here to help. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I think, people understand, and a lot of it has to do with the manner in which the information is presented. And if they understand it's basically just a review, and in some cases it reduces, in some cases it doesn't reduce, and in some cases it's accurate. The largest struggle that we have, and it's one that we're working to overcome, is that years ago, there just wasn't the diligence applied to it. And, we continually, I don't want to say stumble upon, but that's basically what happens as they're out looking for, going to a particular piece of property that they will see like, that's not a shed anymore. It's 3,500 square feet now, so we're continually finding those kinds of things, and then they have to be brought onto the tax roll and identified. And in most cases, it's not a case of people trying to avoid it, they just don't know.
Correct.
It's camp, so you add a room, and, next year you add another room, and before you know it, camp has become pretty nice. And, and those things have to be caught and they have to be identified, and the only way you do that is by physically seeing them. Now, we also do utilize some of the technologies that are available. We use Google Earth, and we use some of the other things to look in the more remote areas to be able to see, is there something there that we're not aware of? And, but then they still physically have to go out there and do the measurements and do the assessment of what the building quality is and what the materials are. And
If
all
we
those
come
kinds of
across a property that's gated, I'm not going to trespass. I will send the property owner a letter stating that due to Google Earth, I observe that there's a structure on your property, but it's gated. Let's set up a time that we can go out and meet you there, that you can allow me access to complete my appraisal. And if they continue to not want to grant access, then I do my best guesstimate. The burden of proof then becomes the property owner to verify why I'm incorrect.
Can you use that drone to go up?
I personally don't feel that the drone,
It's not licensed.
correct, not only that, but I think people have a certain expectation of privacy when it comes to public assessment. And I don't want to be the first line of challenging privacy laws, so that's why I only utilize what's already been published on the internet through Google Earth or Maps, because they've probably already been sued and found that it's
There are
viable.
licensing issues with the drone that, Jason is involved with, certifications and licensing to operate. They have to be in compliance with FAA regulations and a variety of things.
Is there an area that we can use that?
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought that was one of the
Oh, yeah.
indicators why we
Well,
bought it, to use it to
It's
help.
mainly to assist, and Jason, at some point in the relatively near future, is gonna show you basically some of the capabilities that have been used for, but in areas that you can't access by road, is a particular use for something like that. It has a significant range. What's the actual range, about 4 miles? 3.5 miles. So it has a 3.5 mile range, but you can't go higher than 400 feet. So, so it does have, lakeshore, wooded areas, somebody's interested in developing a piece of property, somewhere, and they want to see the terrain features. You can take high-res photos of it and do it
I
from
wasn't too
there.
sure that, what the privacy law was, if
It's developing.
you just go up there and you just go like this,
There are misuses, misuses of drones, and that is creating a body of law, just like everything else. So, there are privacy issues, but primarily, it will not be populated areas that we would essentially be using, and unless we're doing something like aerial survey of the US 41 corridor or something like that. But to go out and find somebody's property and try and circle around, that kind of thing, no, that's not what it was about. However, as Dulcie mentioned, there are commercial products like Google Earth, and it's not today. Google Earth, I think now is, 2014 was the last flyover in a lot of cases. So it's based on 2014 information, but you can get a sense of whether there's an area that's developing like an enclave or things such as that doesn't show on our records.
And I know several board members have asked me how, like, the appeals with the Michigan Tax Tribunal. I just want to let you know, one of the other things that we've worked really hard with local legal counsel to be able to preserve and to keep the integrity of our taxable value in place. So I just want to give you a real quick history on that. In 2010, from 2010 taxable value to 2016, we've seen a 16% increase. Now that could be due to transfers in ownerships and uncappings from Proposal A. That can be new construction. We've seen a more significant decrease on our assessed values, which represents 50% of market. However, you do not pay taxes on the assessed value. You pay it on the taxable value. So we've been doing real well about keeping our taxable value where it should be and generating the tax revenues for all the jurisdictions that we levy for. So that's something we should be proud of as a township.
That's good.
You have any other questions on the assessing?
Ernie?
How many do we have? Do we have anyone at the tax tribunal now that we're working with or have to?
Yes, there are probably about 5 of them currently, and I don't have that list, but I will gladly email that to you guys.
All right, good. In total, there's how
That are
many?
currently just filing for their 2016s. We're wrapping up a couple of 2015s.
How many in total do we have that's
I,
before? All right, another time.
yeah, I don't have that list directly with me, but I will gladly generate that for you guys.
Now, are you talking about total?
we
that
started
total
since
that-
last-
Okay, so
so
how
many.
many businesses have
Yeah,
actually
have we
been
gotten
involved
that
in
down?
it?
We haven't had hardly really any for 2016. The ones that have added 2016 were ones that had 2015 under appeal. So we're not looking at as many as what we anticipated.
And this is just my view, but from my view, it looks like since that Escanaba decision came down, it has slowed down a little bit. But I think what most people are doing are waiting to see what the Senate's going to do in lame duck session and go from there. If the Senate, which I expect the Senate to not address it in lame duck, so it will die and have to start all over again.
Plus a large developer, he canceled his.
Well, and I think the rationale is that they realize the cost, because there is a cost to both parties going forward. You have to have an appraisal, and the appraisals run around $30,000 for an appraisal. Plus
Is that
the
our cost or their cost?
Both. Each of us have to do an appraisal. And, and then there's the cost of actually going to the hearing, filing the briefs, and everything else. So it's an expensive process. It's not cheap. And, at some point, you have to sit and look at what your expected benefit is compared to what your cost to get it is. And it's not a slam dunk, although it has been recently. But it's less of a slam dunk now. So we can put together a list of, I think what you're asking is you want to see a list of all of those businesses that have filed,
Yeah.
those that are still active,
Right.
and those that we expect to file.
And the
Separate.
numbers that go with them, yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for that, because I was gonna ask you to give a synopsis of how that process works. Because the attorney will get the copy to the attorney, and by the time we pay his fees to analyze and look at it and see, and then he has a meeting with Dulcie, and then they'll come in and talk to us, or the letter writing back and forth on just one property. It's a big thing, besides even going to the tribunal by the time you get there.
And I do have to say that Dulcie and Roger has been pretty successful in terms of sitting down with property owners, and I don't want anybody to think that this is a negotiation process.
not
It's
the
not.
N word.
Basically, what occurs is in most of the ones that have gone to the tribunal had not talked with us. They went directly to the tax tribunal. But if there is and we've had several now that have come to us and said, I don't think the taxes are right, but let's check them. So what they've done is they bring in their actual information in terms of what the actual materials that they've used, what the, that finishes, things such as that. Dulcie sits down with them, reapplies the manual, and corrects whatever issues, because when we base that on a site plan, it's what they anticipate building, not necessarily what they actually built. And there have been several circumstances where they expected to put such and such a finish, which is a very high-quality finish, but when they get into the project, they go to a lesser finish that's less valuable, so it reduces the tax. We've been able to settle, I can't remember how many there are, but we've settled some that didn't go to the tribunal. They said, okay, look, I can understand that, and we signed off on them, settle them.
Well, and a couple of the developers realize that when we go through every line item and verify the facts of what have there, what I'm saying is there, and they see how the manual is applied for the cost manual and how we go through, when they see what the difference is and realize their costs to fight it, to go even further, they'll just be like, well, at least I know you're not just pulling numbers, that you have a system and it's based on fact.
Yeah, and I guess that's the main thing, is that there is a system, and we don't control that system. It's controlled by the state. And Dulcie is told basically what she has to consider and how she has to consider it in establishing that value. With some of the property owners, that's been a very effective tool. And
Because they're willing to
it's
pay
worked.
their fair share, and I hate to use
understand
that
it.
term, but they're saying, okay, I can pay my taxes, I see that I'm complying with state law, you're doing it right. It's just fair. I
It's
mean,
like anything else, you try to find the angle that's less costly for you. I mean, everybody does it, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether you're buying a car or whatever. You try and find, the best value, and that's what they're trying to do. We don't point fingers at them or have any disdain. The point is, let's sit down and analyze what it is you actually have compared to what the manual says we have to apply, and it's been successful.
But she's doing a good job because of the other things that, other townships I've talked to, they're in there and they're hollering, screaming, and swearing and that, so, but you must thank you for doing such a good job.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, Ernie?
Going back to this AMAR requirements.
Yes.
How are the other communities addressing it in that? Are they,
It's geared to be an educational process and not necessarily a negative process. It's to point out your pros and cons, your weaknesses and your strengths. So very few communities are actually, and I'm talking statewide, actually pass this AMAR because there's real specific specifications on how they want the land value maps done, how they want minutes recorded, even the public inspection resolution, how that needs to be worded. So there are certain things that even if you're doing everything 100%, they still are finding areas that you should show an improvement in. So after that initial review is taking place, it's really up to what their board's willing to allocate for resources in order to bring them into compliance. Because if you're not in compliance and you refuse to acknowledge that you need to correct any of your deficiencies, the state will assume your assessment role and pay for a brand new reappraisal, which can be very, very costly, like in the $100,000 mark, and you just have to figure out a way to pay for it. So it's in our best interest to continue to be proactive, to keep a plan in place and to fix anything that we come across.
Luckily for many of the townships in Marquette County, they have large tracts of federal and state land. So they, it's not as difficult for them, but they also don't have typically staff. Their assessor is generally one of their elected officials, it's a large responsibility for somebody who has another full-time life.
are they getting it done?
No.
And it's a gamble.
Some are, some aren't. It
They
depends.
followed up with us from last year's review. We just got another letter this month. So I mean, if we don't get 100% or get it to the acceptable on our overrides, they'll come back and say that's not acceptable. I mean, there's a lot of pressure from the State Tax Commission that we are doing our jobs appropriately. And it's not just even me as the assessor, it's a review of the board also.
Because are we mandating that she do this?
And are you providing me with the appropriate resources in order for the functions to be completed?
So I think following up, you're talking about resources, and what Randy said there, the other communities, that don't have the resources, the state's gonna have to step in, and they're not gonna wanna step in with all these communities, not only in the UP and the statewide, because they don't have the facility to do that, and
They
there'll
hire
be
a company.
major uproar.
They hire a company, and whatever that cost is gets passed on
Passed on
to
to
the
the
local
community.
unit.
We pay for it.
So the state doesn't care.
It's just in our best interest to do it.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
what these other communities are trying to avoid, because as Dulcie said, you know, when you hire an outside company to come in and do it, it's very expensive, and the state simply passes the cost along, and if you can't pay it, you know what happens under the emergency manager law.
Frequently, that's called patronage.
Yes.
Last year at the convention, they were talked about, I've asked questions about this because we were talking at the convention, and I asked this a couple of different townships, and they said, yeah, right. I said, well, you have to do it every 5 years? Yeah, right. We haven't done it in so many years, so I mean, that's good that we're above it, you know.
Pending possible dark store things or whatever.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of the value that we could possibly lose from those? And secondly, are any of those, I know that that's in the queue there for multifamily dwellings like apartment complexes and hotels. Have they been?
The only appeal that I have right now for a restaurant is the Red Lobster. As for the hotels, I have none that are hotels at this point, nor do I have any, take that back. We have one developer to the north of us that filed on all of his properties without coming in and meeting with me. Now, when we put together the budget, Manager Gerard and myself, we figured out what our taxable value would generate and assumed a certain percentage for any potential reductions to come up with a real conservative revenue generation. But Dan, I'm more than happy to go back through my files and
I was just
put
curious
together
if you had an approximate.
I don't want to come off the top
Okay,
of my head.
no problem.
I guess I can give you a ballpark, because when we calculated this out, as it sits right now, if there are no more that go against us, our revenue, our anticipated revenue for 2017 to be 1,152,000 roughly. If there are additional challenges, it could be as low as 1,036. So there's roughly $120,000 of potential revenue tied up in potential claims that could go forward.
This would include our property owner to the north?
Correct.
Yes, and that's revenue to us, not total revenue to all the people we draw
Just
from.
on our millage based.
That's just us.
Which then this leads me to,
That's worst case.
am I okay to talk about Lost Creek?
Yes.
Okay. We have, most of you board members realize that we have an ordinance in place that was passed in 1998 that allowed for 100% tax exemption on the Lost Creek properties for all low and very low tenants.
Income.
Pardon me?
Income.
Income that are occupied by those persons. And there's 150 units over there at Lost Creek. This same ordinance allows for the local municipality to levy a service fee equal to the ad valorem taxes for that percentage that is not occupied by low or very low income tenants. I have received the rent rolls from MISHDA since it was completed in 1999, and there has been every year consistently 34% that is occupied by moderate income. The ordinance and the state law states that I can levy a service fee equal to what would be levied for if they were ad valorem. So I just want to give you guys, this is something that should have been being done, but I didn't have a township board that was willing to support the scenario that if I bill them the service fee based on 34% of its true cash value, and they don't pay that bill, that you're willing to rescind that ordinance in order for them to pay it. Okay, so let me just give you real quick so you can understand how much revenue we're talking about. Not just for Marquette Township, for all the jurisdictions that we're responsible for collecting this levy on. The 2016, if they were regular on the assessment roll, true cash value is $13,021,706. if you took the 34% that is occupied by moderate income, would give you a true cash value of $4,427,380. Michigan is a 50% taxation rate state. So if we divide that number in two, we would come up with a tentative taxable value on that 34% that is moderate income of $2.2 million. If we took that $2.2 million and applied the current millage rate, the service fee that we would be allowed to send a bill for would be $103,661, which would then get broken down by millage rate to Marquette County, the state education tax, Marquette Area Public Schools, Marquette Elder Regional Education Service Agency, formerly known as the ISD, Marquette Township, the library, the Iron Ore Heritage Trail, and our DDA, because it's in the DDA district. So by taking that taxable value, and I ran the millages so we can see the impact of what it would have on Marquette Township's budget, the operating fund for Marquette Township would see $8,965 a year. The library would receive $2,005. The fire department, with their special assessment, that's millage based, would see $5,534. The roads would see $3,320. The DDA would see $2,213 because they are levying 1 mill this year. And the 1% admin fee would be $1,026. That current ordinance, we only collect 4% of the shelter rents after vacancy that then we turn around and have to divide within the taxing jurisdictions within our unit. We receive $4,000 for our general fund. I believe it's $4,000, Lois, for the PILT. I want to say it's around $4,000, and the fire department's around $2,500.
Yeah, we have filtered from various places.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember. And the other part of the ordinance that we do already administer is the inspection fees. We do annually bill for the inspection fees on those 150 units.
Is that a yearly?
Yes.
Yes.
So since 1998, it was completed in 1999, we have been missing revenue that by state law and by ordinance we're entitled to bill for. So as you're going forward through your budget work sessions, I'm just asking for the support of the board when it comes to this point. Because failure for them, it's not up to the rest of the residents of this township to be subsidizing that housing development for that 34% that is moderate income. Now, if they changed it to 100% low and very low income occupants, then that's different. But with them currently renting to that 34%, it violates our ordinance and it violates the state act. We're violating it because we're not collecting that service fee. So I'm just throwing it out there for you guys because I know it's something for you guys to consider, and I'll gladly put together more of a presentation, but I just wanted to let you know that I think it's time we start to do this.
We did kind of talk about, Dennis brought this up last year, or the year before, a little bit, and we really didn't talk about it. We just kind of said, we're not going to deal with it right now. So,
It's not something that I've forgotten about, because Dulcie and I have talked about it a number of times in that. I was on the board when this all happened and that, and at the time, pardon?
Your fault?
No, he voted no.
what was the tell us the justification then?
Well, part was the justification was to build it and that. They could, we've done no, if we took no action, it would have been 10% right across the board.
Correct.
And that's what I was pushing for, and it didn't work that way. They wanted to go 4% and that.
And ultimately what they did is they threw into the mix Schwemmwood Park, basically. They threw that part of
Yeah.
the agreement back then, from what I can see looking at the records, part of the agreement was that the developers, Medallion at that point, Medallion Management, I don't know if it still is or not, but with Medallion Management at that point, they were going to build Schwemmwood. Oh, I thought he did. They were going to build Schwemmwood Park, and they never did.
And there's a story behind that too.
Yes, there
Yeah.
is.
And going back to that point in time, there was a lot of discussion. Being a chartered township, this is all under ordinances and everything else in that. And I came to the meeting and they wanted to do it right then and there. And I says, you can't do it. It has to have a public hearing in that. And they says, why? Because I says, the only way you can have this at this point in time is, it has to do with health and safety of the township, because we're a charter township. So I was not looked very well at that point in time. I forced it to go to the next meeting and that. So, and that's the point in time I pushed to have the fire department and then do the inspections over there to get a few extra dollars in that too. But it was,
This ordinance is in place for 50 years.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a 50-year
It was, I
ordinance.
know.
But the difference now, though, is that there are real income people in there.
They
or
have
at
been
least-
since day one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's part of what the discussion is. Back then, that wasn't their intent.
No, it was not their
It was
intent.
supposed to be a
Low and-
different
low-
setup.
It was difficult getting information too.
Well, because at the time that I've been doing all my research, I mean, I've been here for 18 years, and that was something that I have been after for 18 years, to get this so where they're paying their fair share of what's, you know, because it is an expensive complex on the township in
So-
other service fees. So I just think it's what's appropriate is appropriate.
So tell us what you're asking and what,
That's the point I wanted to
Right.
make. I think our assessor is asking us
Back
to
her up.
follow the law.
let's have her tell us what the outcome, what the rationale is and what the.
Procedure would be?
What the procedure is.
Okay, when the new board is sat, I will be coming back to you requesting that I have a resolution from the township board as it would sit, that when I send out the service fee, that would be equal to the ad valorem taxes on that failure for them to pay that bill would result in the hearings necessary to rescind that ordinance.
And
Because then
Roger-
they wouldn't be meeting all the requirements in order to keep their tax exempt status.
And
what
Roger
the
would,
timeframe of
and
that
Roger
be?
would give you the procedure for doing
Correct.
that.
They have like 30 days to comply, or?
Well,
They have-
we would probably want to bill it as if it were a winter tax bill. So it would be like going out, we're probably too late this year, but I'm just saying going forward, if we did it, would be out December 1st.
17.
Failure for them to pay it February 14th, we could levy 3% and then start the, March 1st.
So it follows the
With
tax
all tax, yep,
procedures?
yep.
Okay, okay.
So I will be back.
Yes, Dan.
I'm just curious, and I'm not quite sure if I'm
Sure.
following exactly what you're saying, but you're saying that you didn't have a board to support you. I don't ever remember this coming to this board.
Well, it's been brought to every sitting board.
It came,
I've never seen this specifically come to this board
it
for
was
discussion.
it's never come as a,
Dennis?
yeah, it's never come as a resolution or as a motion or anything like that. It's been a discussion item only.
Because I can't imagine that if that would have came to this board, that the board would have went against it.
Well, it's been brought up in numerous discussions and then it just didn't get,
But not really on the agenda as an
Correct.
item
Right.
that we needed to.
because there wasn't the support at that point to pursue it further.
I just, when you say there wasn't just support, I don't know if I can agree with that, because if it's never been brought to the board, if it's only been brought to certain members, that doesn't include the board.
I did a presentation to the board on a couple of other times.
Did you explain this specifically, that this is
Yes.
what you were looking
I
for?
remember
Yes.
that, yeah. But I don't know if it was an action item. I don't know. I think it was just a presentation as the way
Just to
Dennis
see
had
how
it.
the board would feel and if we needed to pursue it further, and it never,
I don't know that he asked the question.
maybe not, but
I don't
it's
remember.
been on the radar for 18 years.
Well, she asked me, and I said, absolutely, we need to talk about it. We need to decide what we want to do. I don't want to do that here, because I think that might.
Correct.
We need to think about it.
But
and
you
we
really
need to-
can't in this work session. I mean,
Yeah, but I
but
mean,
you
not
would put
even,
it on
no
a,
consensus or anything.
no, you would have to put it on an agenda, on a regular board
So we
agenda
will.
for debate.
Yep.
I just
will
wanted
talk
to use
about it.
this opportunity to explain where it would be coming from, so when you see me again, we can probably put together a lot more of a formal presentation, and you can ask any questions, and we'll put together a regular fact sheet
This-
for you.
This part affects the taxes,
Correct.
and that's why I said this, she could talk about this now to give you a heads up. Ernie?
I'm listening to Dulcie, I'm listening to the direction we want to go, and I'm sitting there to myself. This could have a little snowball effect in the city of Marquette,
Oh, absolutely.
real quick.
Because they own part of it, or not
Well,
own.
looking at the management of two entities there, in the
Mhm.
city of Marquette.
But do we get the choice, either we're gonna follow this ordinance or we don't follow that one. Like John said,
See, because I don't have the authority to rescind an ordinance. It has to be by board action, and so.
No,
I mean,
and what Ernie's talking about is they have the Oriana Ridge development in the city of Marquette as well.
And Whetstone.
And it's well, they have Whetstone, but yeah, we kind of have a joint deal, kind of a joint deal there, which I really don't
They're
understand
ad
how we
valorem,
get
and
into it, but.
Whetstone and the township are ad valorem. They
Yeah.
pay regular taxes.
Yep.
They don't receive that exemption.
Okay, so it's just the other one.
Yep.
Put
But
that-
Oriana Ridge is the same in the city, I think, isn't it? Are they on
Yeah,
ad
it's on
valorem?
it.
They're in the city.
I don't know about their tax status because
Yeah.
I don't.
But Medallion manages both. But the issue here is that the ordinance basically requires them to have low income, and they're not. And the ordinance says that if you've got that moderate income, it's taxable. And it's just never been enforced.
Okay. Anything else, Dulce, that you wanna?
Nope, and as always, if you guys have questions, you can always come and ask me. You can email me, you can call me. I'm more than happy to put together any information that you need. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. If you just wanna email those tribunal
Yes.
things to us, that would be great.
I'll work on that tomorrow.
how is it gonna work with another person working with you?
Oh, thanks, Pete. Actually, my question was, I want you to justify. One of the discussions we had was, I said, give me an ROI. If you think you want to hire another person, what's this going to involve? And,
Well-
and one of the first things that came up was, well, the more properties that we can put on would almost pay for it. That was what you initially kind of found out.
Yeah,
Well-
what you're really talking about is halftime. You're adding a halftime position there, because she's already 50/50
That's true,
between
yeah.
planning, zoning, and the assessing. But realistically, basically, she is now able to be a standalone assessor, and, and that's where your return on investment comes from. She can go out and do the assessments while, along with Dulcie. Granted, they generally don't go out necessarily by themselves, but when you're doing things like Trowbridge and, the populated areas, basically, that aren't out in the middle of nowhere, then yes, they can do independent and separate. So, but I'll let Dulcie speak to that.
Well, there's a lot of programs that we're not able to administer. For example, property transfer affidavits. When a sales transaction takes place and they fail to file that property transfer affidavit, we have the ability to fine them, to send them a bill for, $5 a day up to 45 days, $200 maximum, or 40 days for $200 maximum. We have no way to even begin to put that system in place because we don't have the staff to do it. We have homestead exemptions that require certain filings and the way that we have retention. We're not even able to do those. Once we put those in the computer, we're clipping them and setting them aside. We don't have even the ability to file. It's the clerical day-to-day and the help on the residential class is what I need, because that's our most active class that we have. Because every time a deed comes through, there is data entry, there's address corrections, site visit to make sure that the sales price that we have on that deed represents what was there as of tax day, to make sure that there were not a construction in progress, to make sure that we missed something on our assessment, because we use all of those sales that come through to help determine what our market is doing, whether or not our neighborhood has to see an increase or not. We develop what's called an economic condition factor that is specific. We have one specifically set up for like Trowbridge Park. What that means is a sale that comes through that is at Lake Superior is not being compared to a parcel in Trowbridge Park. They're two totally different attributes that would define those neighborhoods. So it starts with that sale that comes in. There are about 6 to 8 steps that you have to do with every deed just to be able to verify if you're going to utilize it later when you're establishing all of your assessments, because we do mass appraisal. One sale does not dictate your market, so we have to look at all sales that come through to figure out what neighborhoods are seeing the increases, which neighborhoods are seeing the decreases. Because it wouldn't be fair to the people of Trowbridge Park for me to say, due to the sales that are taking place on Lake Superior, you're going to see a 10% increase on your assessments. Because in reality, maybe some of the sales that are taking place in Trowbridge Park would result in a 5% decrease in that neighborhood. We have to have different neighborhoods of like attributes to determine what the market's doing in those sections.
You got the equipment and the programs to do that yet?
Yes, we utilize the BSA assessing software that when you enter in the deed or you receive the deed from the the equalization department at the county, we review those to make sure the legal descriptions match. Did they try to split off property we're not aware of? Did they try to add property that wasn't part of that original parcel?
You just don't have the manpower, right?
No. Because this isn't something that's going to go away. Every time a deed comes through, you're handling it and you're vetting it, you're making sure it's accurate, and if it's sold tomorrow, you'd have to go through and make sure nothing's changed.
And I asked the same question of Dulcie. Can you get somebody that you're gonna pay a smaller wage to that would come in and just do clerical work or follow up or filing or something like that, where we don't have that huge expense of, a full-time person or paying a high wage? And she said pretty much the same thing that Ron did. No, I need someone who's qualified
Right.
to be able to handle this, to have the knowledge and the training. So,
Because otherwise, I'd be going back and doing all the work again to verify that
that.
they were doing it correctly.
right. Dan, did you have something?
With this creation of this now full-time position, we're actually changing the job description of this person, correct?
Make it full-time.
So now that, now,
From MCAT to MCAO.
so now the job description basically was part-time planning, part-time assessor. Now this person is full-time assessor. Does that now change the salary because she will be a union person?
I don't do that I don't do the classification wage.
No, as of right now, the point factoring does change, but it does not put it into a higher rate.
So you're moving her from a part-time assessor, part-time planner to now a full-time assessor, but the wages is gonna stay the same? Okay.
Ernie?
If you remember, the way our compensation system works, there are point bands, basically. So it's moving from middle of the point band to the top of the point band in that same grade, based upon changes.
Okay.
Listening to Dulcie on what this individual would be doing in that. So if you sat back and listened to it on a manager-type level, after you listen to someone going to do it, then you ask the question, what are you going to do? When you go through all the steps and say, this individual's going to be doing all this, and you ask the question, wait a minute now,
Market analysis for all the commercial development to try to cut down on our MTT appeals.
that's what I'm saying. When you go through and start laying out everything this person is going to be doing, and you sit back and you say, okay, now, what is this individual going to be doing?
Well, it'll be shared functions. It's going to be,
I know
no, I'm
that-
just saying, it's going to be a lot of shared functions, but she will be helping a lot more with the residential end of it. Because there's a lot on the commercial end, we don't have the staff or the time to be able to do it. Because I'm only 3/4 time assessing myself.
Right. It's 2/4 time.
So I'm still a quarter time in treasury. So we have been doing everything we can just to stay with our eyeballs above the water level. Right now, the way it sits. And eventually, if we continue to operate under that, something's going to get missed and something's going to come up where we're going to be non-compliant. Because we can only go at that level for so long.
The other question is, this is going to be a level, she's a level 1 assessor.
Yes.
Going back to when we were told we had to have a level 3 assessor in the township now.
Correct.
So if can this individual, rather than referring to anyone, go out and do the assessing because not being a level 3, just being a level 1?
She can do the assessing work, she just cannot assign the role. You need a level 3 to sign your assessment role. They can still perform the functions of doing the field work, they can do the measuring, they can talk to the customers, they can enter the appraisals into the database. They would serve more of a clerical function for the board of review, that if for some reason I was not able to attend the board of review due to a scheduling conflict, they're authorized under the state statute to actually be the assessor that can sit through the board of review sessions.
Randy?
In my travels, a lot of townships of our size with staff, a lot of deputy treasurers are full-time, so a lot of deputy treasurers are full-time in other townships, and Dulcie is 3/4 time, so I think we're getting a pretty good bang there for our buck.
I was hired full-time as deputy treasurer, but the
But
work
then-
didn't warrant a full-time employee.
And changed over time.
Yeah.
And as we get bigger other things happen too.
Well, we find ourselves with a level 3,
Yeah.
you know, as the oversight, basically, and then a level 1. And, you know, and the issue is, and this has been, it's the reason we got into the trouble we got into, is that there are more parcels and more issues to deal with than the one person could deal with previously, and Dulcie's been trying to catch up. We added the technician position to assist half-time, and they've gained some proximity, but I guess I would put it this way, the increase, well, what is it? The increase in cost that you're talking about for the assessor to add this position is, what is it? With all the roll-ups that would go with it, you know, the increases with workers' comp and everything else, it's a total of just under $32,000 total. And that's one appraisal.
Commercial MTT appraisal.
If we don't have to do, that's one appraisal.
And let's not forget in history, before we had to make changes, you had a full-time assessor and a three-quarters-time assessor prior to me, and that person no longer being here, and me stepping into that role to fix it. So it's not something new to the township. In fact, it still would be considered understaffed.
I was just talking to the township the other day about the people, and they have a small township. They got a supervisor, a manager, treasurer, deputy treasurer, clerk, deputy clerk, and two more, I think, I forget. And they're a lot smaller than we are, and I thought, oh, we're doing pretty good.
And it's not that we have an overabundance of a parcel count. We just have such a variety of property that we're required to be local experts on. It can go from a hunting camp with an outhouse to a multi-million-dollar home on Lake Superior, to a multi-million-dollar parcel on our corridor. So it's not that, it's just we have such a variety of different parcels that we're expected to be able to do all the analysis on. I mean, it requires people to be able to do that.
Well, and the other piece of that is that the parcels themselves are transitioning from one class to another class.
Mhm.
You see that all the time.
John?
My reading of this is that what we're doing is we're achieving a set of employees that are proficient, multitask performers. Not a lot of them, but that's what these are, and I think that's good. To me, that makes sense. The more we can do that, the fewer employees we need.
The more effective we become.
Well, and that has
Else
been the
for
history of the township. I mean, you know,
Sorry?
we don't, I said that has been the history of the township. We have modified, you know, we went from a clerical position to a technician level position. Now it's up to an assessor position as the need and the skill level increased. You know, it was over time. You know, and so, but we've done it in-house. We haven't gone out and hired people, so we've avoided that recruitment cost and, you know, those training costs. It's been basically over time, and it's the same thing in the planning and zoning department. You know,
We have that history then, too, with the employee. They
Well-
know more of the departments.
You do have the institutional memory aspect that comes along. They're already familiar with what happens in planning and zoning. They're already familiar with what happens in public works. They're already familiar with permitting processes in different divisions.
Just how the operation works, too.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, being that I'm on the Michigan Assessors Association Board, every time there's a new act or a new policy that's passed, requires more clerical end of the assessors, the paperwork shuffle is only going to continue. Look at what they did with the personal property laws. That is in itself such a program to be able to even administer. We're kind of lucky on the end that we don't have the ones that qualify for that special exemption. We just have the companies that have 80,000 or less on their personal property, which those will require affidavits. I mean, every time you see something come out of Lansing that's a new mandate that used to be something they would administer is now hitting the local level. It just adds to our list of things that we have to do every year just to get to the point of having a completed assessment roll. So it just doesn't stop. I kind of feel like a mailman. I never really completely feel like I got something done. There's just constantly.
Here comes more.
Well, that's a lot of information on the assessing department, so we can let Dulcie go and,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
Very nice
Yeah,
job.
that's why I wanted her to have a real comprehensive report, sure.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, give her a buzz, and then we'll hit Jason next.
5-minute
We're
break.
doing well.
5-minute break.
Yeah, it's just 5 minutes.
You got any takeout containers at home?
Thank you. Okay, we're back. Just a quickie break. We're gonna talk to Jason McCarthy, Planning and Zoning Administrator, for his budget. Does somebody wanna give a start? Do you wanna explain, or Randy?
Well,
On the
basically,
general side?
really, the only significant change to the planning and zoning budget is what we had talked about partially with the assessing. And that is, Jason would be giving up the half-time position that he has as a technician. Between he and I discussing, we are seeking to add a full-time staff planner. That would increase his budgeted cost by a little over $13,000, $13,135. But with the roll-ups, that would be $16,769 total change. And the purpose of that is to start to divide, much as what was happening in assessing. The number of items that are ending up on the planning and zoning plate is such that it's just, we're not getting it done. There are some very significant projects that the board and the planning commission want done, and we want Jason to concentrate on those projects, those major long-term projects. From your standpoint, one of the major ones is the asset management plan for the local roads project. Once the roads are finished, we have to get that asset management plan in place and manage it for the next 15 years. Do the appraiser ratings every year, do the assessment of what's happening on the roads, and keep them properly maintained. What we would see the staff planner doing, and I had sent out a breakout basically, day before yesterday, I believe it was Monday, sent out a breakout of what we anticipate would be the primary responsibilities of the staff planner, working primarily with the committees, the road committee, the recreation committee, which right now are after-hour committees for Jason's staff, and a number of other items that are on there. And I'll let Jason go into more detail on that, but again, this is the same kind of a situation as we were just talking about with assessing, is that the demands that we have and the activities that the board and the planning commission want pursued are beyond what our current staffing capability is, and we don't anticipate that to slow down. We anticipate that to accelerate as we go forward. We do have a couple of major projects right now that are in the hopper, as well as several others that Jason's working with that will be occupying his time from the standpoint of working with the developers, with the planning and the zoning aspects of their projects. So with that, if there aren't any questions of me directly, I'll kick
What
it over
about
to Jason.
enforcement? Who's the
Staff planner.
staff?
That's one of the items on the staff planners to
I
be
think
the
we've been
ordinance
neglecting that
enforcement.
for many years.
Oh, we have.
Yeah.
You know,
It's just not
the
getting done.
property maintenance is the primary one, that ordinance, but you've also got the noise ordinance, and you've got several other ordinances that are typically problematic, that occupy a lot of time when they come up. Just as by example, I don't know if you remember the flag issue that we had with the big flag on US 41, and how much time that took, just chasing that down as a noise ordinance issue. So those would be the kinds of things that the staff person would take control of, take charge of, to free Jason to work on the bigger project items.
Especially in enforcement, I think by doing that properly, we could solve a lot of problems with snow, especially like, my biggest thing is snow off the pathways and blocking the intersections that we don't follow up on and stuff like that.
Well, that we're gonna deal with in the general fund budget, not in the
Yeah.
planning budget, but that's building
That's
and
part of
grounds.
his job, he'll be taking care of that.
No, building and grounds will be doing that.
No, I mean enforcement of the people who
The
are
code,
not doing it,
yes,
the code.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you're
Yeah.
saying,
because
yeah.
The other side will take care of that, we're planning to get it done.
The actual doing it.
Right,
Yeah,
but
the
the people who are
enforcement.
violating that and causing problems, we can control that then?
Property code enforcement is a big issue around the township. That, you know, that is a major time consumption to get that under control as well.
And I asked Jason the same question. Can we hire some part-time person or someone at a lower wage that can be the code enforcer or give him more time to do something else? And it just kind of keeps coming back around to needing a real person to have qualifications to fill these slots, because we're such a small office doing specific things. It's hard to bring somebody in that can just, there really isn't any clerical. You have to be able to know what you're doing and do it. Dan?
I'd like to ask what the total cost, salary, and benefits for this person would be.
It would increase, well, I'll give you two answers on it. One is what the actual total cost is, and then what the budgetary impact is. This position, the staff planner, do it here. This is an existing job description that we had, so this is not a new job description. It simply hasn't been filled. This is staff planner. The total salary for this position for the first year would be $35,900. The impact on the budget of Jason's, based from what his 2015 and 2016 budget was, including the roll-ups, the benefit roll-ups, would be $16,769.
How much again was it, 32, did you say?
35,932.
That includes benefits?
No, that's the salary. And then
Okay.
if you roll up the salary, there's another $3,000 in salary roll-ups, benefits.
So his is actually gonna be like more like $19,000 to $20,000 in his budget, because he's gonna have to cover the benefits, correct?
Well, he's already got in his budget, remember the halftime that he was giving up from his 16 budget? We've retained that halftime cost in there. The total cost is 36 plus about 39,000.
I guess where I'm curious is I'll ask Jason this. In your narrative as well as your budget, you didn't show this person. You were basically, the way I look at it, content with the halftime. You did not show a full-time. That's Manager Gerard that moved up to a full-time.
That's correct. The narrative was done previous to my understanding of when the manager wanted to take action on this position.
So did you, at the time you created your narrative, feel that this would be feasible to work with a part-time person?
When the narrative
I'm asking Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
When the narrative was done, I had not spoken with Jason about the full-time position.
I know.
After
But
the
if,
narrative.
but what I'm saying, I'm asking Jason, when he did his narrative, was he satisfied that a part-time person would be able to fulfill the job?
Not a part-time person.
Well,
We could
you
continue-
got halftime.
We could continue to operate at the status quo, Danny. But I feel personally, my experience and skill set, that there are other opportunities out there for the township. Since 2011, we're approaching $1 million in grant funding. So I think that number alone speaks volumes about, supplementing the general fund and improving some projects. One thing that needs to be addressed is property maintenance. Every year, it seems like you can spend a lot of time on that. And you pay me handsomely to, promote the township, create relationships with our developers, and see site plans through, and get relationships developed that'll help us in the future. I think I've been successful in that. Property maintenance and fence permits and garages and sheds are typically something that an entry-level person does. We've benefited from having Janelle, who is very well-rounded, just through her process and experience and years here. But she's been taken away quite a bit over to the fire department, and that's forced me to answer calls on on residential types of things, you know, things that she would normally pick up. So I guess that's a long answer to your question, but, you know, we can continue on the status quo, but there's still going to be those issues and things that you as a board have, you know, put emphasis on wanting to address that, you know, just the day-to-day operations. I don't know that with a community our size, with the development pressure that we have, that we're capable of doing it.
So this
And I
is,
hate to say that to you, I really do.
this is still kind of a two-sided coin here. If we agree to what's happening with Janelle, we have to make that kind of a twofold decision. Because if we take her away full-time, now he has nobody. So, you know, I had a couple conversations with Jason in the beginning when we first started talking about all this maintenance stuff. And I said, you know, we have ordinances in place that need to be enforced. We're not doing that. How come? Well, you know, we're doing this and this and this and this, and I can try to get that in. Okay, so should we go to Northern and try to find some kid that could do this? Well, but then you have this, and we have the liability, and you have the, you know, the enforcement part, and how can you do that if they're just you know, so it evolved. In the meantime, then I was talking to Randy, and we're saying, okay, so how can we split this up, and how can we give them this more? So this whole process, and I can see why this happened the way it did. The writing came kind of after the 2 discussions or 3 discussions, and we kind of all, and Randy being budget manager said, okay, we're gonna do this, you know, this is what has to happen.
None of the narratives put in by the department heads, whether it be planning, zoning, deputy treasurer, assessor, or fire department, originated the idea of the expanded staff. I did that. You will see it in my narrative, the general fund narrative. I am the one that's proposing that, not them. That's my observation as a township manager in terms of where we need staff support to accomplish the things that the board needs to do, and the most effective way to do that. Supervisor Durant and I had a number of conversations. Supervisor Leamington and I had a number of conversations over multiple budget years about how do we best provide the services that need to be provided and accomplish the things that the board wants to accomplish through strategic plan or through board discussion and action at the least cost. And in my opinion, this does that. And that's why I made these recommendations, and that's why you don't see it in their narratives, and it's why you don't see it in their recommended budgets. You see it in mine. I'm making the recommendation to the board.
Hours-wise, what kind of hours would this, would they be staggered hours, so we can cover up meetings and that rather than pay overtime?
Sure.
Is that what we're thinking about, or?
That's what I'm
It's a
thinking.
full-time-
In your-
it's a
some of your-
full-time
your
employee.
comment, we're talking about overtime and stuff like that too, and.
Yeah, this would be a position, this staff position and the position in deputy treasurer and assessing, the assessor position is flexible scheduling. I mean, it's going to be up to Jason how it's scheduled in this case, and it's going to be up to Dulcie how it's scheduled in the other case. In Jason's case, the conversation that he and I had was specifically about covering those committees, so he's not tied to that time and booking comp time and overtime and not being available. So it actually expands the number of hours that are available, but the property maintenance doesn't have to be done 8 to 5. Property maintenance can be done by whatever schedule the 2 of them work out and what the availability is. You know, and the same thing with the assessing. That's not tied to an 8 to 5 schedule. You know, if Dulcie has to be in Lansing, you know, she's on the board, and that's, I guess, one of the things that I wanted to mention as well. 2 years ago, we started a target, basically, to become more involved in state activities. So we're better informed on what's happening and better on the cusp of legislation and things that might be coming. Jason is getting involved with the planning, Michigan Planning Association. Dulcie is now on the assessors board, state assessors board. I sit on the MERS board, so I know what's coming up from the standpoint of retirement costs and things such as that. And Kirk hasn't made as much progress, but basically he is getting more involved with the statewide organizations as well. We have Lenny Bodinas, who is serving on some safety committees for the state. So we're trying to get our network out there more, so we're kind of in the loop and in the discussion and aware of what's happening in those agencies, or aware of what's happening here. So, we've been making that effort, and, and that's the whole point of this, is to try and improve our services as much as we can with as little cost as possible. With regard to the cost of this position, it's probably not going to be a revenue-generating position, but it will be a position that will get people into compliance with our ordinances, which in and of itself eats up a lot of staff time.
Thanks, Ryan.
So that's
Well, I just want to
that's
throw that
my-
out because, you
but that's
look at
my-
overtime, and there's ways of juggling that thing so we don't have a bunch of overtime, because that way we can justify other things that we want to get done, so.
But that's my motive
Yeah.
for the recommendations that I'm making, and, we've talked about staffing multiple budget years, and this year, I just felt that we're at the point where we need to take some of these actions to get the staff, on staff, basically, and to move forward.
Jace.
Since this has been brought up, there has been a lot of analysis done by myself and, the overall scope of what we do as a department. Previously, Janelle and I had broken up our workload based on, she does the residential decks, new home permitting, signs from a commercial aspect, business licenses, data entry on, the assessing program that we have. And I've done the commercial aspect along with grants and other things, but the way that, that I kind of see it is that the new person would take over what Janelle basically did, along with some property maintenance. And that's why you need a professional. You need a professional that's organized and knows how to handle a workload like that. And then moving forward, in 2019 and 2021, we have two major highway projects coming through. We have a DDA that's looking to expand. You have a Township Business Association that wants to see improvements to lighting, pedestrian access, and aesthetics. There is continued development pressure on land use, and that we're about built out in our commercial area. So that is going to change. There needs to be analysis done on where development can happen, both from a suitability standpoint and from a utility expansion standpoint. There's opportunities for recreational partnerships, as we've discussed in the past. Records keeping can be improved, data entry, mapping updates, all things that take time to do. Public and private partnerships can be enhanced. That's something that I feel that I'm strong at. Continuing to nurture and enhance our relationships with our municipal neighbors, as well as local, state, and federal regulatory agencies, which are all, the city hired a lobbyist. I believe it's my job to serve as a lobbyist and to champion the township, which we've been pretty successful at, to have nearly $1 million in grants over 5 years, approximately. So, I want to continue to grow as a professional, and I think that sometimes it helps to have somebody take over the things that you did a number of years ago when you were a junior planner. Now I want to, not necessarily reach for the stars, but certainly, continue to grow as a professional and to be more of an administrator than, the grunt on the ground per se. Not to say that I'm not happy doing anything that I do. I love my job, and I'm glad to, issue a fence permit and things like that. But I think that my skill set is better suited for, helping the township realize some major goals.
Well, plus you took on, we got the road project going on, and the software is, for that particular project, is not just 15 years, it's an ongoing thing. It's every year you have to update your phaser, and then you start scheduling your work and that, so I don't want people thinking in 15 years could be all over with. It's not, it's an ongoing thing, so it's not gonna go away.
And integrating our other software programs to house that under one umbrella, including fire department. That's something that we, would gladly work towards.
Yeah, with regard to the road project, as you'll recall, the original 15 years was just the start, basically. And the objective is to maintain those roads at least a Paiser 6 rating throughout that entire 15 years.
Because next year, we have to come back and start, well, not to get into roads, but I mean, that phase will tell us, okay, next year we have to come back and start putting another layer on and update that, and following year, and, you know, so.
Ongoing
I think it's very, we don't want to go backwards. We went backwards once on Lions Field, I believe, and then after we did all the work, and now it's up there, we don't want to go back, and the same thing with the roads, the people are so happy with it. So that program's very important to us, and you have to take care of that.
Agreed.
How about down here? Ernie?
Well, a couple of things. You're talking about grants. I know you've written some grants. I'm always concerned if, like, we had a couple grants that we couldn't act on because we didn't have the dollars in it.
Right, matching
And that's what
dollars.
I'm concerned with, writing grants and that from whoever. How much dollars is gonna cost us, regardless of what we're gonna get back from it. We don't have the dollars to contribute. There's no sense putting the time in and doing it. And
Well,
that's another
There's
question.
another way of doing that.
But not all grants have matching funds, and that's what we want to target, are those that are just outright grants.
100% match, 100%.
But we have to have that discussion, and this is gonna come into the play of the committees when we get into that discussion as to what we're gonna be looking for. Right now, I don't even wanna get into that right now.
Okay,
But,
but that was a,
But that's kind of, it has to come from that angle.
when you're talking about grants, I'm concerned with the dollar
Yeah.
amounts that we may come back to the township.
Well, and what we've been, honestly, what we've been talking about with regard to grants are the private sector grants that are not the public sector that require the 25 or 26% match, the Kellogg grants, the things such as that, specific to ball fields, to ice rinks, to things such, they're $5,000 to $10,000 grants that are pure grants, just like Hockeyville, that kind of thing. So those are the kinds of grants we're talking about. Now, obviously, you're gonna have to have quite a few of them, so we're gonna get into that cycle of being involved in grants and having grants ready to go when those are published and come up. Typically in the springtime, Kellogg has them for ball fields. There are others that have healthy lifestyle grants for things like parks and climbing, kids' parks and things such as that. In the wintertime, you've got grants from Bauer and various other companies that deal with skates and hockey to upgrade, improve, maintain facilities. So those are the kinds of things we'll be looking at.
The other, excuse me, the other question I have is that we're talking about these additional FTEs and that. I'm looking further down the road. What was that?
I think it was one of the pop cans, pop jars.
Oh, okay. I didn't think I talked that bad. So-
They're gonna
But
shoot you?
I'm looking at, 4 years, 5 years down the road, when our current interest and everything for our buildings come up. We're talking about balloon payments, what effect that's gonna have. I'm looking further on down the road. If we do certain things now and those balloon payments come up, how do we pay for those? Refinance them under a higher interest rate, the rates are going up now, we don't know what that's going to be. So, these are all things we have to keep in the back of our mind, what we do today, what effect that's gonna be a few years down the road, how are we gonna afford some of these things?
That's
We may
the-
end up have to back off on some of them. then.
Well, those are the first things that we budget. Those are the first things that we fund, are those commitments that we have for the properties, for the buildings and like such as that. Those are the very first things that go into the budget to ensure that they are paid, and then we build the budget around that. And you'll see that on the last page of the budget, where you've got your long-term debt page. We have principal and interest identified in there. And those come out first, before we do anything else on the budget. Now, when you add staff, you're not necessarily going to pay for it by additional revenues coming in. I mean, basically what you're doing is providing services and enforcing some of the aspects that you've put into place that have not been enforced. So it's just like, the discussion we had with the fire department about possibly adding emergency service capability. That's break even at best. And, that's what we're talking about here. You don't add a staff position to per se increase revenue in the public sector. Private sector, yes, because you're producing more. Our job is to provide service, and that service comes from taxes. That's what it comes from. So as long as we budget within the tax capability, we'll have to make some decisions going forward as to what we fund in particular years and how we fund them. Maybe we fund them like we did the Kitty Park over 3 years.
Well, I would also
Smaller
look at that adjustment to the planning to be potentially encompassed by assessment increases.
The whole thing works as a package.
That's the way it was framed to me.
Yeah, the whole thing works as a package. It all works interplay. You know, it's all to give us the capability of providing the level of service we need to with the minimum amount of staff and cost.
Any questions for Jason?
The rest of his budget is pretty much the same as last year. We still have a contribution in there to recreation.
Trustee Pompo has a.
Oh, Dan, thank you.
While I got you here, I have a question, since you're the planner. Last year, we were put in place a ordinance for lighting. And I'm looking in the budget, and I see no increase in improvements for lighting. Are we basically saying that we are not living up to our, I mean, there's like none, even add one light?
Are you talking about street lighting?
Yes.
Okay, that comes out of Randy's budget.
That's 50
And
50,000.
any new street light that the Board of Light and Power is putting up right now are the full cutoff downcast LED lights.
I'm not arguing that, but what I'm saying is we have an ordinance, and it seems to me that this year's budget doesn't show like we're really doing anything with the ordinance.
The outdoor lighting ordinance pertains only to commercial development.
No, I think when we did the street lighting ordinance, I'm very sure we did the street lighting ordinance, 300 feet. Remember all that?
Yeah, I'd have to look through it again, but it's,
You know, top of hills, all that kind of stuff.
yes, I remember distinctly. I'm wondering if that was part of, it's within the right of way. It's not our property, so I don't know if it made it to the final or not, but I can certainly follow up with you on that.
I'm almost guarantee it did.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be in planning's budget anyway.
No, that
I'm
would
saying,
be
I'm not
my-
saying they're in
I-
planning's budget. What I'm saying is planning is in charge of ordinances, and I'm just saying, when I look at the budget, I don't see anything in front of the street lighting increases, and since it is an ordinance for the township under planning, I just want to make sure that it's understood that we're not fulfilling the ordinance, as far as I'm concerned.
In our last road committee, we put out, coming up with mapping out where the lights are now. You got hills, if it's more than, for what percent on a curve, intersections, and that's what we're supposed to be working towards. You know, and like Dan said, 300. That's the recommendation that'll come out of the road committee, and it'll go to Randy then.
It's actually the ordinance.
Pardon me?
It's actually the ordinance.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure
but I
what
mean,
you're
where to
saying
put
there.
them is the.
What I'm saying is the fact that we worked a long time in creating the lighting ordinance for the township, and we approved it last year. And I'm looking in this budget to see some kind of additional lighting put into the budget to work towards this ordinance, and I don't see anything.
There is
So my
none.
question is, and I'm sure, Pete, that their committee is working on it, and that's really nice, but there's still nothing in the 2017 budget for any lights, not even, I mean, I remember one year we said, well, the 12 lights. Unfortunately, the 12 lights were all put in a row and not really separated around where they should have went. But there's nothing in this year's ordinance.
It certainly wouldn't come from my budget, but
No, I'm not saying it would come for your budget, but because
would
of,
be a
because
capital
it's planning, you would be,
yeah, no,
ordinance-wise, it was.
planning is working on it from the road committee standpoint, and even when you're gone, we will continue to promote and enhance the lighting.
Yeah, there are a number of ordinances that are not being enforced simply because there isn't the staff to do it. No, I did not budget into this budget anything more than the 30% increase in utility cost.
Well, because I always classify as lighting as a safety issue, I think that should be one of the more important issues to be looked at.
Well, maybe we need to look at putting away, whatever, $5,000 or something to get more lights. I guess I thought it would be in here too. It didn't dawn on me.
It was lighting and signs and all of,
So the repair and maintenance covers for lighting, just covers.
because every lighting that we
Covers
put
the
up.
existing lights.
Actually,
Okay.
separate one for lighting.
Yeah, it's separated.
Yeah, I get that street lighting, but that's electricity.
Electricity, repairs, and maintenance.
We did put them
We
over
put it
by
under
the schools.
capital last year.
Well, because, yeah, we were doing so many.
No, that's a good point that he brings up, and yeah, the board should put away money, honestly, to fulfill the ordinance, but to also maintain safety in the township.
The next request is from you is to get a map, and we'll talk about it another time, but of the township, or the Trowbridge Park, and then we're gonna put dots, and I had one before, but where the lights, existing street lights are now, and then go to our policy, and then go and say, okay, we need them here, here, and here, but every light is $8 and some odd cents, a pole is about $400, so we just had to plan that ahead of time, that's all.
No, your bigger cost is installation because of the rock.
Yeah.
But that's something that we
Our problem areas.
have to decide that, if
It's
that's what we're
policy,
gonna do.
yeah.
And then we'll tell planning that we want you to set up a map or something. Kinda like we asked you last meeting to put something together, an overview. So,
Wait, an overview for what?
Trails. It was trails, wasn't it? The
Trails.
Trail connections? or
Yeah,
the,
yeah, sorry.
Non-motorized.
Along with design standards.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
We're talking about lighted
From
trails.
lights
That
to
was the
trails.
design standards discussion.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry.
that's already done.
Yeah, that overview. Yeah, so that's gonna come from the board to determine, if we want maps of lights or something. I didn't want you to run out and start doing,
Oh, the light map that he's talking about is already done too. It just needs to be updated.
okay.
But we did have a request, the guy asked me if we could put lights on our trails. I said, well, not this year.
The NTN may be losing one of their lit loops.
I think we better move on.
Yep.
Any more
I
for
was
me?
just looking for something, but I didn't see what I'm looking for. Anything else for Jason? Anything else you want to tell us? Questions for us? Something you'd like us to do or not do?
How's it going overall?
Gainfully employed, I mean, I
Now the
can,
township, how's it, what do we got coming and going and,
well, I did have a meeting with Mike Conter today, who represents Lindbergh and who is representing the property that Meyer is on. They have a contractual, a contract basically to perform some of the spec work ahead of the closing of the sale at their own risk, in case, it doesn't go through. But he doesn't see that property changing hands till early next year. But as far as they're concerned, everything's moving forward. Jandron is moving forward. We thought we were going to have a late submittal for a couple of new developments east of GFS. Those haven't come forward yet, but we suspect that they'll be going in earnest in the spring.
Have they worked out the land issues with Meyer yet? Is that still kind of holding them up, or are they just finished?
The property has not changed hands. Myers has a ton of due diligence that they have to do before they'll, but believe me, the Crimmins team, the Lindbergh team, is doing everything that they are asked to do to make it go forward. I'm excited to get into a phase of planning for the corridor. As you know, we have an expanded study that's going on right now with Parsons Brinkerhoff. I did have the drone up last week in the corridor, taking images that they requested to generate some 3D mapping and 3D modeling of what the corridor could look like, which is really interesting. Schwemmwood Park has been finished off by the rec committee and my administration of that grant. We should be getting some money back here pretty quick from the state of Michigan to reimburse us for the money that we spent. I don't know.
Jason, what about County Road HR behind Peak there? It's been on the plan for how many years, and is there any way of taking that road and mixing it in with the other one, or?
Sure, how much money you got?
No, that's what I'm talking about, there's a big valley there, What's the thoughts on?
We haven't heard a thing from up the sky in a number of months. Don't know what their status is. They had proposed a con-span bridge across that gap. I know Pete Odevero did provide the taper right away with that would be required to do something like that. But I have a feeling Up the Sky is going to wait until Meyer is properties transferred and probably approach them for access.
Yeah.
That's my hunch.
Any more filling on east of GFC?
GFS?
GFS, yeah, Gordon Foods.
Yes, the development there is imminent.
How fast can they fill that up, Jason, and compact it and come like that?
Well, they're limited on what was approved. You'll never be able to fill in the entire ravine, but both Smith and Lindbergh have separate fill permits from the DEQ and/or EPA to fill portions of that area, but some of it is navigable stream, so they'll never be able to fully encapsulate that.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the commercial property there that, could be developed on.
There are,
They're making as much developable property there as they can.
Jason was referring to earlier, that there are discussions going on about that.
I drove down Wright Street and saw lots of HVAC stuff attached now to Odevero's building. Can we do anything with that?
You can by approving some of the new design
away.
standards, yeah.
It's making that building look worse.
Oh, well, the HVAC's always been there. I'm just trying to
know.
get them to
I just
screen
haven't
it,
seen
so,
On both sides?
yeah. Yeah,
Awful,
there's a lot of air moving through that building.
I suppose.
And it was, his subcontractor for that building definitely overbuilt that unit. But
Even, what would design standards help us with? What could we do? Put fencing up or
Possible
Fencing,
shielding.
brush,
what are our
bushes,
options?
or,
screening.
Screening?
yeah.
Okay.
You don't want too much trees and shrubs around.
No.
No, you have to have a 10-foot clear area.
Yeah.
Most units are found on the roof, except for on a building like that where
Right there.
the roof is not really a
The road's
load-bearing.
right there. I don't know. I don't like it. All right, anything else? I think we can excuse you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sitting here and waiting and
Thank you.
having
Thanks, Jason.
everything prepared for us.
How about another hour, come back? Nobody will be here, but that's fine.
So I bet you Clerk Atari's just swiveling in his chair here, waiting to get his done.
Yeah, my budget's gonna be very short. My salary, if we go to the page, account 215 clerk,
Here at the back, okay?
it's in the general fund, but it's towards the back,
Open elections.
15?
something like that. We don't have page numbers on these.
What? Remember Lois put them on there
No,
last year.
well, I don't have them on mine, but
Yes, you do.
He's looking at the budget.
Oh,
on
I
the-
was
I'm
looking
on
at,
the
I thought you
narrative.
said the narrative.
well, the narrative and the budget are gonna coincide. There's no change in the elected official salary of $13,000. The deputy clerk is gonna stay the same at $250. I'm not going to the conference, so that money is not gonna be there. I might go to some local training, so that will be there. And if any gonna have any in the salary full-time reflects the accountant, my accountant / deputy clerk at times. So if anyone has any questions on that, now is the time to ask them. And then hearing none, the next part of my election will, next part of my budget will be elections. The only significant,
Page.
on the next page, the only significant change is I am budgeting for one election in 2017 if the board chooses to go forward, which is about $2,000 to $2,500. Hopefully, if we tag along with another election, it would be a little cheaper. So hopefully, that would be the most it would cost us if we did not tag along with another eletion.
Randy, there's
We don't
people,
have any regular elections.
No, there's no regular election scheduled in 2017, so that's why if we do have one and we're not tagging along, we'll incur the full cost.
what about election, updating the election?
Okay, that part of it will come out of the capital, and that's capital improvements, and that's farther down in the general fund. I'm budgeting $6,000 for new voting machines, and that's going to be 3 of the new AccuVote machines. And those machines will replace what we currently have, and they will replace the handicap machines also. So both machines can do the same item. So we'll get we'll get rid of 3 of those big boat anchors that we won't need anymore.
And how long are these good for?
Well, the last ones have lasted 20 years, so I'm expecting a 20-year life on these.
Are we gonna meet the qualifications that the state is talking about now?
Yes, that's what the capital expenditure is going to be. Is that's going to bring us in line with what the state's going to require for us to
Is
have.
the state gonna help us in any way, shape, or form?
Um,
paying for this?
Santa Claus?
They might, but I was told by the county clerk to budget at least $2,000 for the machines for what we need, because the state says and what they do are different. And that would be the most money that we would expend for the machines. So hopefully that won't be the whole cost for us, but if we do have to incur it, that's what I see the maximum being. And I'm being conservative here, so. 'Cause like I said, the state's putting money away for new voting machines. However, with other items in the state at the time, and even next year, moving forward, the money that they've allocated could be sucked somewhere else.
We'll never see it. Detroit will probably see it more
Yeah.
than we do.
Randy, why are, in the article, I forget, I was reading, that they said if the state change their mind, they'll get new, they'll mandate that you get new machines again.
Well,
What's that all about?
if they mandate, we have to get them. By doing that, though, if they're mandating it, that's going to mean
They have
that
to pay-
they're going to have to incur some of the cost
Yeah,
for
okay.
us.
Well, we've got unfunded mandates all the time.
Yeah, I hope you have better luck with mandates than I do.
Yeah.
So, and then I don't see any problem with my computers for poll books right now. We should be good for the next few years. However, down the road, I see we're gonna have to upgrade those laptops too to something like what Lynn has, or some smaller, more. Because these are, well, they're 2 or 3 years old now, so computers only last a finite amount of time. So I see that as a continuing cost too. We're gonna have to keep our e-poll books up. We did get the initial ones for free, so that's good. But if I can upgrade them, I will, to try to keep the costs lower. But sometime probably in the next 4 years, we might have to get new computers for that also. But I will try my best to keep that cost low. And as far as the clerk's budget, that's about it. If anyone has any questions, like I said, it really isn't different from last year. And actually, it's kind of a reduction because we don't have some of the expenses.
Looks good.
All right. Check it off.
I think we did pretty well, don't you? For just putting it all together in one meeting? I'm
Yeah.
kind of
We
tired,
actually got the
but,
treasurer too. We want to go to the treasurer.
yeah, that's what I was looking for, and I thought, well, maybe somebody moved it.
It's right below the clerk.
Well, I was looking for the narrative.
There's no narrative. There's no
What are we
narrative.
paying you for? Don't we get a narrative?
Yeah, where's the
Gosh.
narrative?
All right, we'll just go to the
We'll
page.
wait till we get the narrative
You have
then.
9 minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
Go.
No, let's go.
If you look at it, it's almost the same dollars as last year. We're down a lot of dollars, that's all. There isn't much change in what we're doing. We put some money, continue to put money in computer services because we're never quite sure what's gonna happen there. We have to do that. Because Dulcie was talking about the computer programs, which we are into it. We don't have any choice anymore. We have to do all that. It's sitting there in that. I put money in for the MTA, and there's questionable whether I go or not. If I don't go, that money can be reallocated someplace else in that. But, everything else is pretty well the same. If you look at it, there isn't much differential on anything in that. The biggest thing is salary, until we get through the union contracts and everything else in that, that's gonna change. How much is gonna change? We don't know. Same with
Wait.
hospitalization.
Wages and hospitalization are fluid at this point.
Right, so you can look at that, and I, as a treasurer, have no control over that at all. It's out of my hands, and whatever happens, happens in that too. And the clerk's office the same way in that, so. It's relatively, the same. We haven't had any need to do any great expenditures at this point in time.
Dan's got a question for you.
No, I don't.
Oh,
Not for Ernie specifically. I have some other questions.
well, let me ask him a couple then. How's this gonna work with you and Dulcie now? She's gonna stay 3/4 time? Do you
Quarter
think-
time.
Or I meant quarter, sorry.
Some of her work has been moved off to Andra at this point in time. Andra
Small amount, yeah.
collects all the dollars and she updates the files and that. She's still gonna stay at this point in time. I think sometime in the future, it's gonna be a discussion point. Is how that's all gonna work, so.
Do you need more time? Is that what you're thinking? or less?
Not more time there, but I think
How it's allocated.
how it's allocated. And maybe that as things change, rather than being a quarter time of Dulcie's time, we may end up having to have someone else pick up that quarter time, which means we have to reallocate those dollars someplace else to another person somewhere in that. I can see that 4 to 5 years down the road, something like that.
Okay, not right away.
No, not at this point in time. It's something I think we have to just have on the horizon, that
Yeah.
it's a possibility.
It's not imminent. It does become a factor a couple of times a year when we're doing tax collections, and there's a lot of public activity, but Dulcie is working with Andrew to pick some of that up. I mean, the front office position can do some of that, so.
No, the biggest
it's
thing
part
there,
of
and
it.
I've talked to Randy too, when you start moving some of those job responsibilities off to someone else, do the dollars also follow or not? That's something that the board has to
Yeah,
really discuss on some of this too.
And
How you wanna
that really depends on how much responsibility is changing. It's not just, you don't just get more pay just for doing, more of the same kind of work. It's if you're amassing more responsibility, new responsibility, that's where you start to see some changes that might impact cost, the pay rate.
But this is something else that you
Yeah,
have to look
this-
at when you start
Oh, yeah.
making these alterations and that too, so.
That's
I
true.
think the other thing is that, I should have brought up earlier, but if we move forward with this new one-time person for planning, the actual physical location for this individual, that's something you're gonna have to look at, where this individual's gonna reside within
Yeah.
the office and that too, so.
Yeah, we have 4 workstations in the center of the office. There would be one of those stations.
Any other questions for the treasurer?
3/4 time is a dance beat.
Okay?
That's a good observation, that's true. Anything else for Ernie? Okay, Dan, whatever you've got.
Okay.
Tell us what page.
Pardon me?
Tell us what page you're looking at something.
No, I'm just, I got a couple of things, but I guess the first thing is being, in the last couple of years, due to dark stores, we've been taking the best case scenario and the worst case scenario and picking something in between. This year, we've taken actually the best case scenario, and with the description being if everything goes south, we will have zero balance in our budget, which I don't really like to see, without any kind of a fallback area on that. So that kind of bothered me. The second one is, I'm just kind of curious, under the clerk, I noticed the salary for the clerk actually went down. Is there a reason for that?
We worked on that.
It was based on 2,088 hours for this year, and it's 2,080 hours for
Next year.
So it's a one less pay period, Lois, basically?
Last payday, yeah.
One less day or something?
Okay. And the third thing being, under debt services, even though it's not an official debt service, but I don't see anything on the considering the solid waste loan that the general fund took from the solid waste. I don't see any payment to that. I don't see anything really anywhere in that. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed pretty quickly, because that's been going on for quite a while.
You've been putting, bless you.
Yeah.
You've been putting money against that.
I don't
We
see
did
it.
last year. Yeah. Are you referring to the 36.5 that came out this last time for the MNRTF, or the
Oh, I'm
the older
talking,
one?
I'm talking about the old one.
Yeah, no, the older one, we did not put anything in there for this year. We did last year.
But that doesn't show up as a debt anywhere in our budget, does it?
No, balance sheet.
It's on the balance.
On the balance sheet.
Yep, yep.
Yep. And, you know, that 127,000 that's at the end, we do not expect to drop down very much further in terms of, for 2017 anyway, in terms of the dark stores. You know, Dulce and I spent quite a bit of time talking about that, and that's why we went at what the current estimate is right now. That's that 1.151 is what we currently estimate our 2017 likely revenue to be. If the several that are currently filed with the Trackstar Tribunal all go against us, then we would be cutting into that 127,000 net effect at the bottom. Absent that, we would be reallocating again like we did before. We would take a piece of it to go back to the solid waste fund, a piece to go back towards the building principal, and same as we've done in the past.
I suppose we'll have that before the end of the year. Will we have that determination?
The ones that are currently pending, we will know whether they're actually going to, they've filed with the tribunal, but we have not had any real expenditure as yet, and Roger is working with them to see if there's a settlement possible based upon recalculation like we've done with Otavero and several of the others.
I was trying to
It's,
remember.
right now, it's a towing cost,
We just got one last week.
yeah, on the
Trying to think of the
Red
timeframe.
Lobster.
Yeah. They've got so many days, we've got so many days. I think it's by the end of the year.
But actually, you know, Red Lobster's a little bit different. That will not be under the dark stores. That's just an outright tax challenge because they're not dark store.
Who's this now?
They're
Red
not
Lobster,
considering-
the restaurant.
Okay.
They have not so far been under the dark, they've filed as such, but they have not been taken as a dark store. So that was a straight out tax challenge.
But getting back to the solid waste and that's gonna come up, and the question I'll have for Kurt is, this year, it's almost 11% increase in the tipping fees, and they've got that projected out for 10 years out.
Right.
outwards and that. Something we have to, I say we, this board's gonna have to address every year in that too. He's looking at decreasing the cost on it, but part of the reason, when I look at the actual fund balance on that, to the balance sheet, there's a big balance there.
There's a sizable balance, yes.
Plus what the general fund owes it.
Owes,
that
correct.
too. So you got a lot of dollars sitting there, and I think I brought this up last year. Why are we charging the people so much when we have all these dollars? And I'm trying to get Kurt to run a long year projection into the future, what the costs are going to be, to see what we really should have setting there. Anything above that, can we somehow decrease it? The problem with
Yeah.
that, if you decrease it, then you
15%
have to
increase
increase it,
on it.
then you have another problem.
I think the only way you can do that realistically and be reasonably safe is to work with the DEQ to see what closure costs are for that kind of a landfill, because that's really what you're on the hook for, is a closure cost. When and if it does close, now they project they've extended it again 50 years. But if they have a failure, you know, if the membrane fails, you're going to be responsible for a piece of the cleanup, you know, those kinds of things. So I think the only way Kirk is going to be able to do that is to try and get some kind of a reasonable projection based upon the size and the volume and those kinds of things of what the DEQ would estimate closure costs would be, and then maybe target that as your balance. Very similar to what the utilities committee did. They set 140,000 as their target, and once they got there, they quit depositing to it. I think that's low. I don't think that's high enough, but so far we're outvoted. But I think that might be the approach to take, is to try and put an estimate, then put that against what is in the balance plus what you're owed from the general fund, and see how much more needs to be put in there, and then stop raising it.
Because we do have a lot of money in there, and we're one of many. It's not as though we have to pay for the whole thing.
Well, and yeah, and we're only, what, 15% owners or 15% liable? I can't remember what it was from the breakout.
But if I remember right, in the fee that we pay the solid waste, X percent of that is supposed to go to a closing cost. How much, I don't know, but there was supposed to be so much of that going to a closing cost. I've never seen it anywhere.
Not on their books. I haven't seen it in their books either.
That's what I'm bringing up.
Oh.
I'm going back in time where I thought a percent of what we pay them would go to a closing cost.
So that's probably their percentage.
I don't know that formula.
I have no idea.
If there are 10 of us, including them, they're taking, I'll betcha, that's what it is. They're taking
I don't know.
a figure from us,
Hmm.
putting it into their closing fee, so they don't have to absorb it.
All the municipalities are supposed to be putting so much toward the closing costs within their actual billing cost that they pay.
We're gonna make a comment on the clerk's, or the treasurer's budget, that it looks okay.
Yeah,
We did that on the clerk.
yeah, but he's the clerk.
Where do you want me to cut? There isn't much else to cut.
I think
there.
it looks good.
Yep, I think we're both good. They're both good. 7:03,
That's a wrap.
we can call it.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
We'll do this again
Monday.
Monday.
And the long meeting has been a
It
success.
has, I think. I think we've